What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to episode 50 of the Silver and Gold. I'm Josh.
And I'm Mike.
And today, we're going to be recapping week one, and then we're going to be talking about what maybe both teams can do, to improve going into week two. First, since the 49ers did play tonight, we're going to begin with the 49ers, and then we'll sort of backtrack to the Raiders because I feel like maybe there's a little bit more to talk about, in terms of the Raiders' loss to the Chargers than there is about the 49ers' dominant win over the Jets. So let's go ahead and kick this off. 49ers versus Jets. We have breaking news. The 49ers still kick ass at football. It's, it almost feels like I feel a little spoiled because, over here, it's like, I don't know. There are years where you just expect to win games. And like last season, you and I both know, or like everybody who tuned into the stream knows that like I picked the 49ers to win every single game. We'll see if it plays out that way again this season, but I had like my doubts kind of going into the game about like, man, is it going to feel like a Super Bowl hangover? But the 49ers just sort of like maybe on the first series, maybe, started off a little bit slow. Like I'd say both teams like started off stronger on defense than they did on offense, but the 49ers did not have Christian McCaffrey, and they still put up like 32 points. Player of the game, I would have to say, is a toss-up between Deebo Samuel or Jordan Mason. And Jordan Mason is one of those players that for years I have just been wishing that he can find his way onto the football field because he's very talented. He's an aggressive runner. And I mean, before the game, we all got the notification that McCaffrey was not going to play. And once I heard that, I thought it's smart. Why would you push him to come back when, like, the news, what was it, earlier this week? They were saying it's not just a calf strain, it's also like an Achilles sort of issue. Like,
right.
We in the Bay Area have seen firsthand that if it's somewhere along the lines of that, you probably don't want to push it. Like Kevin Durant in the playoffs in 2019, obviously that's basketball, this is football, but still same thing. Professional athletes who are at the top of their game sort of push it through a little bit of injury and then they never come back the same. We'll see. Like, I know Dre Greenlaw going into the Super Bowl had Achilles tendonitis, and I'm not sure if that was the Achilles that ended up rupturing, but it's one of those things where it's better safe than sorry. I think the 49ers are a better team having won this game without Christian McCaffrey than if they would have, like, the risk reward just wasn't there. They could have, and they did win this game without Christian McCaffrey because Jordan Mason is just that good. But I do have a couple notes. Mike, do you have any thoughts before I get into my notes of the game?
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, Jordan Mason and Deebo, I think the Niners defense played exceptionally well, especially against the run. I think to what you just said, as far as, without McCaffrey, like they were able to get it done with Jordan Mason. I think that says a lot about Jordan Mason as a runner and as a running back who has good vision, but he's a powerful runner too, right? And he's got some burst to him. Like, he's a good running back. I think it also says a lot about Kyle Shanahan. I just think he's the type of coach where, you're going to have the occasional setbacks, and he is able to coach the offense to persevere, and I think that showed tonight because the Jets defense, that is no slouch of a defense. I know they're without Hassan Reddick, and I don't know how much Quinnen Williams played. Quinnen Williams, he was in, right?
Yeah, no, he was in, and then on one of the first drives of the game, he sort of bullied Colton McKivitz on like a pass blocking, or it was a pass rush, and he was able to put pressure on Purdy, and then literally like the first note that I have under my notes is like Colton McKivitz is still not good, at least in pass blocking. You know what I mean? I think that is the area of his game that will be the hardest to improve, and if it's going to happen, like we have yet to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think the Niners defense looked impressive. The offense looked shockingly impressive considering it felt like it wasn't just McCaffrey that was not playing in this game, because at times it felt like Ayuk was not playing when he was literally not on the field, but also just what did he end up with? Like maybe 3 targets?
Talking about Ayuk, I
Yeah.
want to say he had 4 targets because in the first half, I want to say he had 2 drops and then probably ended out with like 2 catches, 2 or 3 catches. So maybe 4 or 5 targets.
Yeah. Well, it was a game in which going into the game I felt, well, once McCaffrey was announced as out, uh I thought the Jets were going to win this game. And I ended up switching my pick to the Jets, and Kyle Shanahan and Jordan Mason and Debo Samuel said, "No, no, we got this." And the Niners got the W.
hmm Real quick before I get into my notes, I do want to shout out Fonzie, who's in the chat, and Fonzie has been like one of the day one viewers. Fonzie says, "Bang bang, Niner gang." Mason for sure, yeah. Mason was probably the player of the game because he had this was his first career NFL start, and he had like nearly 200 yards, and maybe it was like closer to 175, but you know I thought that he looked good, and like Mike said, obviously the Shanahan system helps, but you know, I think that Jordan Mason could start at running back for a lot of teams in the NFL. I think he's that talented, and
I think he
maybe
could
we'll
start for the
see.
Raiders.
Yeah. Although there is a running back on the Raiders that I do want to discuss, and I think maybe you can probably think of who it is, but we'll get to that later. So if you're a Raider fan tuning in, stay tuned. We will be talking about the Raiders after we're done with the 49ers. So let me get into what stood out to me, in terms of the game, where I just I was on my phone, Google Docs, took a couple notes. So, like I said, Colton McKivitz, I still don't think is that good at pass protection, at least. And so keep in mind, these notes are going to be in sequential order of like when I saw it in the game. So I did have that there was a rough drive for Diamador Lenore, on the first Jets touchdown drive. Yeah, no, he probably had a couple. He had a play where he gave up a third down reception to Garrett Wilson, and then later on, right before the touchdown and on the touchdown play. All right, right before the touchdown, the wide receiver went in motion, and then you see Lenore sprinting to that side, and he just overran it, gave up the inside, and that put the Jets on the goal line. And then Breece Hall, I think, was able to carry it in for a touchdown on the following play. And Diamador Lenore, you can see that he sees exactly where the run is going to go, but he just doesn't fill the gap or help. I'm not necessarily sure if that's his assignment, in that particular situation, but I mean, it didn't look good. So I'm sure that they'll clean that up in film, and he'll do better because I think Lenore's a good player. But yeah, another thing that stood out to me was Ayuk, like I said, had a few drops in the first half. Mainly, I mean, the first one was kind of a good play by the defender, but I think Ayuk probably could have hauled that in. And it just doesn't look good because he held out during training camp, and it's like, you know, I feel like that's a ball that Ayuk can normally bring in. And then there was the play that Purdy threw to. It was going to be a diving catch, but Ayuk, it hit him in the hands while he was diving, and it was a hard play to make, but it was definitely a catchable ball, I would say. And then Debo had a great game, as I put on my notes. Jordan Mason had a great game. Juwan Jennings, there was a moment where he was getting tackled, and it was clearly a hip drop, and it showed that, like, Jennings, he got up and he was kind of like
Hobbled.
he like hobbled and I don't know. The NFL did implement a ban on hip drop tackles, and I feel like that's as clear as it can get. That
Yeah,
was
I even
pretty
texted the
clear.
group
And
chat. Yeah.
yep. And the body weight was shifted onto Jennings's legs, and he literally got hurt, and it wasn't called. So this seems like one of those penalties that's just going to be called when it benefits the Chiefs, or sorry, when it benefits whoever, right?
Right. Unlike the ever so popular this week, what was it? Every team was getting called for what lining
Illegal
up
formation.
illegal formation. Yeah, every team. It was like, what the hell's going on this week, dude?
Yeah, and then so Fonzie says Debo literally went and put a chain around Jordan Mason's neck after the game. That's the player of the game right there. Yeah, I'd say I mentioned both Debo and Mason. Debo definitely like carried the 49ers in terms of like the wide receivers went today. He had to have led the 49ers in receptions easily today, or tonight, I should say. And then Jordan Mason just he picked up the slack on in wake of McCaffrey's absence. So yeah, Jordan Mason, I would give the game ball to him, but Debo also stepped up too. And I was wearing Debo's jersey tonight, so I sort of anticipated that. Mike was hoping for a big game. I think I predicted in the preview, if you want to go back, I predicted that Debo would probably have a big game because of Brandon Ayuk kind of holding out. It's probably an easy prediction to make. So, you don't have to go back.
I sent you a tweet that was interesting, but on your Twitter, not the Silver and Gold. Denny Carter at CD Carter 13 tweeted, Jordan Mason said the team told him Friday that he would start Monday night. And then he basically says after that Jordan Mason probably was not supposed to say that. And Ted Nguyen quote tweeted it saying, yep, 49ers are going to get in some trouble. I'm not sure if they're actually going to get in trouble, but it's interesting that the Niners, perhaps you could say secretly planned on resting Christian McCaffrey when, I don't know. It's just interesting that they told Mason on Friday, like, yeah, you're starting on Monday, and yet there was no news until like an hour before the game,
Well, it could
he
be
was
pretty
questionable.
easy. It could be pretty easy. The 49ers can just say, yeah, our plan was to start Jordan Mason, and we thought that we would be able to slowly work McCaffrey in, but his calf didn't feel right. So, yeah, I don't know. That's one of those things where I don't think there's going to be much there. I think it would be different if it was a situation like last year with Bijan Robinson where he did suit up and he was sick and that was unreported. So I don't know. I feel bad. I feel really bad for everybody who like did those special promotion pick'ems. Christian McCaffrey more or less than half a total yard. Like those are the gimmies, and a lot of people probably just smashed the over because they thought that he was going to play and probably got screwed over. So yeah.
Here, I just sent a tweet to the Silver and Gold Twitter. If you can just play it and read it, I'm curious.
Yeah, I'll pull it up. 1 second here. So this is from Kevin Kruger. So hold on. Do you want me to read this, or you want me to just play the clip?
I'll read it really quick. Jordan Mason was upset during the post-game press conference. After the game, he told reporters that he was told he was going to start on Friday. Kyle Shanahan was asked about this and said that this was not true. And then this video was Mason after all of that.
When did you find out that you'd be in the starting lineup?
That question right there is why I'm at. That's why I don't like really talking to media, because you say one thing wrong and then, I don't know. Just skip that question.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's definitely news to me. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I didn't get a chance to watch any of the post game press conferences because I was on my way home. I was at my girlfriend's house, and we were watching the game together. And I was like, well, let me rush home so we can do our stream. Pia's dad is tuning in. Mr. C says, good to have you guys back. Mike, how do you feel that the refs did on officiating the 49er game? What can the NFL do about the refs? Because I feel that it's not just the Niners they are messing up on.
Yeah, I mean, the big one for me was missing on the hip drop tackle. That was one, like I said, I was the one that texted the group chat like, that was definitely a hip drop. And I didn't notice it in full, like, real speed. I noticed it on the replay in slow-mo when they were like, yeah, it looks like Jennings is injured. Let's roll back the play. And I'm like, dude, he just held his waist and pulled himself up from the bottom. It was like telltale. I was like, come on now. I didn't notice any other like egregious penalties in this game. I kind of stopped watching around the end of the third quarter, kind of getting ready for the pod and getting my room situated and whatnot, getting ready for work this week. But I think my biggest issue with current day officiating, like, okay, week 1, the officiating was just full blown, the I don't know why I keep forgetting the term, but lining up incorrectly.
The illegal formations.
Illegal formation. Thank you. I don't know why that was such an emphasis this week. I don't know if they made a new rule in the offseason and it just kind of went over everybody's heads. And then, week 1 is like, whoa, they're really going on that one, aren't they? But for me, I think the biggest one is just it always seems like it goes in the Chiefs' favor. That's really the one that annoys me the most, is just when it's like Chiefs, big moment, fourth quarter, 2 minutes to go, they get the call in their favor, and it's like, bro.
Or call a timeout. The
Oh,
assistant coach calls timeout when they're not supposed to be able to, and they just give it to them. But one thing I will say is I think the illegal formation thing is probably an emphasis this year because everybody last year was pointing out that the Chiefs last year, Juwan Taylor would line up off the ball every single play, and he would false start every single play.
Yeah.
I think Jason Kelsey talked about it where it's like, in slow motion, it's clear to see the false start, but in real time, it's like, it's kind of hard to, kind of close to see it. And maybe Jason Kelsey's a little biased because that's his brother's team, but
also Lane Johnson on his team, the Eagles, he would do it too.
Yeah. So definitely, I think maybe they probably took a look at that, and it's like, well, we can't have everybody just complaining and everything. So we're gonna call this a lot early. Everybody's gonna forget about it at the middle of the season, and then in crunch time in a deep playoff game, it's gonna hurt one team, and then nobody's gonna stop talking about it. That's just how it's gonna end. That's how these things work, dude. So James says, real quick before James, I did have one more point on the officiating. They were holding Bosa a couple times. I noticed he gets held like every single game. But there was an unnecessary roughness call on an interception, and it was a horrible call. I want to say number 99, who I think that's Malik Collins. He really aggressively blocked an offensive lineman on the interception return. And they called that unnecessary roughness, but like, dude, I mean, the play is live.
Right.
I think the ref just, sort of threw the flag because like it happened right in front of him and the dude just like got swept up off his feet. But I don't know. I was always taught head on a swivel. The play is not dead until they blow the whistle. So I thought that was a bad call as well. But James, I think, is talking about Jordan Mason here. He said be ready, not be ready for a full game. Don't know why you get punished for fantasy BS. Yeah, no, I kind of agree. I think it's like, McCaffrey was probably like nobody penciled him in as the starter. Everybody's just sort of assuming that he was going to start this game because he was going to play, but you never know. Were they going to ease him in? So I don't know. Come on. Like, the 49ers were going to win this game either way. And this is, like James said, kind of fantasy football bullcrap. Although I do love me some fantasy football. Not this week, but definitely in years past.
Yeah, I think there's a conversation to be had depending on what the plan was there. Like, if the plan the whole time was, yeah, McCaffrey's not playing, like, I'm pretty sure you can label him out earlier, and then there's game planning and all that stuff. I think just my hunch here, what probably happened was, like James is saying here, they probably told, or Kyle probably told Mason, be ready to start on Friday. Like, we are prepping just in case for you to start. It's entirely possible that Jordan Mason slipped up the truth of, yeah, I was told that I'm starting. And that's what Kyle told him because they wanted to give McCaffrey a rest break. Maybe. And if that's the case, like you said, I think that there can be some wording in there so that there isn't any like penalty or anything. It's just like, well, we were preparing for that or something like that. It could be that simple, but I don't know. I don't think this happens too often where it's like, yeah, the team knows ahead of time. It's usually like, no, we want McCaffrey to play. But in this case, it's like, well, maybe they just determined like, I don't know with this calf. Let's just plan on not having you and yada, yada, yada. And obviously he didn't play. I don't know. It's just, okay. My assumption is that Mason slipped up. Kyle heard about it because he immediately got questioned about it afterwards. And he got pissed off because he's like, fuck, why the fuck is Mason saying that? Like, he can't say that or something. I don't know. That's my assumption is once Kyle Shanahan got questioned, he went to Mason and said, dude, you cannot say that shit. And then Mason got flustered like, fuck, I fucked up. And then in that video that we showed, it's like him just thinking, this is why I don't like talking to the media, which I totally understand, and he doesn't want to get in trouble. This is supposed to be his big night. And now he's flustered, which sucks for him.
Yeah, it might not even have been Shanahan who told him. It might have been the PR director because, from what I understand, the PR director sort of preps the person before they go up and do the interview. So, like, they probably asked Shanahan about it. And then, like, the PR director, after Shanahan was asked about it, was like, hey, don't say shit about it. Whatever you got to do to avoid the question, like, we'll handle it. So, yeah. James says the amount of holding on the line is ridiculous. Yeah, it's the NFL. Bosa was put into a headlock again and no call was made, says Fonzie. And, the last comment we'll take here before I finish my notes is, yes, when 99 got the unnecessary roughness penalty, the official got hit, I want to say that number 99 pushed the offensive lineman into the officials. So they got hit. But, the final few things that stood out to me in the game were, Juszczyk was open a few times, and they finally were able to connect for a big pass to get to the goal line, and then later on, another thing that stood out was Diamador Lenore bounced back after I said that he had a rough, first drive, and he had a good tipped pass, on the Flanagan Foles interception, and under my notes there. That's when the bad unnecessary roughness call, transpired. And
okay.
Yeah, it was on the
Gotcha.
Flanagan Fowles interception. There was a 15-yard
Yes,
penalty.
that was a great play by Diamador Lenore.
Yep.
Great
and
play.
then there was a bad play on defense. It was an offsides, which Aaron Rodgers is notorious for. And then it was a touchdown pass to Allen Lazard. So we sort of got like a flashback to the Green Bay days between catching people offsides and then touchdowns to Allen Lazard. So, and then there was a moment in the game where Trent Williams went to the locker room, but he ended up coming back without the training staff. So it seems like he was fine. Maybe he just had to use the restroom. I don't know, but. My final note, the final thing that stood out to me was there was a 4th and 1 to force a turnover on downs, and there was a great play by Isaac Yiadom on that play. But besides that, the 49ers kicked ass, and we are going to, look on to the Vikings game in week 2. Before that, not to backtrack, sorry. Let me go ahead and share something because we mentioned it at the beginning of this topic. Mike changed his pick from the 49ers to the Jets, and I stuck with the 49ers. I was right. And Mike was incorrect. Hold on real quick. Is that no? Okay, I used a different green last year.
I should have never doubted Kyle Shanahan and his preparedness.
You should have never doubted the 49ers. It's probably February is probably the best bet to doubt them, under this regime, but anywhere else it's not a good bet to doubt them. So, 49ers versus Vikings preview. We can go ahead and I think the 49ers are going to kill Sam Darnold this week.
Yeah, I think the Niners are going to beat the Vikings. They do have Christian Darrisaw at left tackle. I'm trying to think. I don't know who the right tackle is. If they have a respectable offensive line, I can see the Vikings putting up points, and by points I mean like 10 to 17 points, right? On the Niners, while the Niners probably put up, say, 28 plus, if I had to guess. But regardless, I think the Niners will win this game. I guess my point here is I don't know, something tells me Sam Darnold this season is not going to be as bad as we think. And
I'm not saying that he's going to be bad. I'm just saying that, the Niners are going to win.
Yeah. I just think Kevin O'Connell is a very impressive play caller and head coach. And I think, they've had a full offseason to prepare with Sam Darnold, and they have the best, I could say, probably the best wide receiver in football in Justin Jefferson. And, that'll mean something, although I think the Niners defense will still stop them most of the time. So,
dude, the Niners defense looked really good tonight. So if they can keep that up, I think my prediction is going to be that they're going to make Sam Darnold look bad. I just think that there's going to be those head scratching plays. And I don't know, who did the Vikings play this past weekend?
It's a good question. Was it the Titans? No, that was the Bears versus the Titans. Because I know Aaron Jones scored a touchdown. That's all I really remember.
Oh, they played the Giants. Yeah, so they beat up on a bad football team, with a bad quarterback. But so I don't know. Sam Darnold played well, but he's going to be facing a much stronger defense, and they're going to probably get down. But one thing I will say is last year I was pretty confident when the 49ers were going to play Monday Night Football against the Vikings in Minnesota, and this is going to be a game in Minnesota this year again. I was pretty confident that the 49ers were going to absolutely wreck the Vikings in that game because we were going to get Monday Night Kirk. But, Kirk Cousins played very well in that game. It was one of the few times that he actually played well on Monday night. And I don't know. I think Kirk Cousins is a much better quarterback than Sam Darnold. So I like the 49ers odds, I guess, because I think the Jets are I think they're a decent football team, and the 49ers took care of them pretty well. I don't have that high of expectations for the Vikings. The only thing that the 49ers kind of really have to look out for is Aaron Jones going to gash them kind of the same way that he did in the playoff game against the Packers this past season? Like, Aaron Jones played very well against the 49ers, and if he's got that kind of juice, maybe that offense can get something going, because guarding Justin Jefferson that's already going to be a handful. But I just see the 49ers pulling out this game. That's my prediction.
I think Jordan Addison isn't going to be playing in this one, and I don't even know who the Vikings starting tight end is right now without TJ Hawkinson. So I just think they're lacking in weapons right now. I think their best bet is getting Aaron Jones in space and probably throwing it to him. And Justin Jefferson will get his, but
Yeah.
it won't be enough. So Niners will be winning this game.
All right. Can we set that in stone? So we're both picking the 49ers. If McCaffrey doesn't play, are you gonna switch your pick again?
I am not switching this time. In theory, the Jets on paper are a playoff team, but they're missing Hassan Reddick. And I don't know. I guess I really do think the Niners defense played well, and it wasn't specifically that the Jets offense played like shit. But maybe
they were doing good on that second drive. The Jets, they were rolling.
The second drive was good. Yeah. It just, I don't know. It almost felt like between turnovers and coming out of halftime, the Niners receiving the ball, like there was a lot of time spent between the second and third quarter where the Niners just got the jump on them and got a big lead, and they were able to maintain that with Jordan Mason the rest of the way.
Yeah, I want to say the moment where the sort of momentum kind of shifted in the 49ers' favor and we never looked back was when Breece Hall fumbled and the 49ers got it.
Yeah.
So
right at the beginning of the drive, yeah.
That's one of those where, I mean, it can change a game, and it did, because this could have been a very close game, but the 49ers just pulled away after that.
Yeah.
So, and then I guess I can kind of squeeze this in, but shout out to Jake Moody. He was 6 for 6. He was 6 for 6 tonight after having sort of a rough season last year. And there was one kick that hit the left upright and bounced in. So
yeah. I sent it to the group chat, but in our fantasy draft, I ended up going with Younghoe Koo, the Falcons kicker, just because of the name, and he's been notoriously good as a kicker. It's just, in theory, the Falcons offense is going to be good this year, and I'm starting to have slight doubts about that. But he hardly did anything in his matchup, whereas I almost picked Moody as my kicker in fantasy because I was like, damn, we got a bunch of Niner fans in this league, and nobody's picked Moody yet. But I was like, nah, I'm going to go with the young, fresh offense with Kirk Cousins and yada, 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 and if I had Moody, I would have won my matchup this week. So I'm like, damn.
Yeah, but so here's the thing. This is the reason why Moody didn't get drafted in a lot of fantasy drafts. There's two reasons. One, because last year he was kind of inconsistent and looked like, every single time that he was going to line up and kick, it's like, this is not, I still felt that way today. I'm like, this is not a gimme, but he was money today. And another reason why he's not a very sort of
sought after
popular fantasy kicker is because the 49ers last year scored so many touchdowns and not a lot of field goals. So you kind of in fantasy have to kind of feel out, all right, which offense is good enough to get to field goal range, but not score a touchdown. Because if you're scoring touchdowns, it's like 1 point here, 1 point there. Meanwhile, the kicker for the Seahawks, the Seahawks don't have the firepower to put it in the end zone every time, but shit, they get right in range and then they'll kick it. They'll play those kind of games with you. So, so that's sort of why Jake Moody got faded, I think, this year. And but I think we are ready, Mike. I think we're ready to move on to the Raiders. And, for everybody who has tuned in and commented so far, if you're a 49er fan, please feel free to stick around if you are interested in hearing about the Raiders. But if you're not, I understand, I'm a fan too, but really think about times where you were upset with your team. This is, I think, where Raider fans are at right now. And if you are the type to comment, maybe you can offer an outside perspective, or even, I think we're about to have a very good conversation about the Raider game, even though, Mike's kind of dreading this. I can see him curling his toes over there and scratching the floor, clawing it. If I really peek, but Mike, let's talk about the Raiders versus Chargers. What happened?
They turned the ball over 3 times.
Yeah.
That's what.
They turned the ball over 3 times, and I mean, all right, going into this matchup, I predicted that the Chargers were going to win, and I don't think the Raiders should have, I guess, like, all right, the Chargers are not a great football team, and I think they proved that on Sunday. I just think that the Raiders were a little bit worse. Let me go through my notes because I rewatched the game today. I watched most of the game like live, but like I rewatched it today so that way I could take notes and really talk about it. So I'm going to go sequentially through my notes, and Mike, feel free to chime in at any time if like maybe your notes or your thoughts kind of, overlap.
Yeah, I
So
really have no notes. I'm just gonna go off the cuff, really. So
yeah, no, that's sometimes that's what you got to do, when you're a fan of a team and your team loses, I guess the way that the Raiders did, it's like you got to go off the cuff sometimes. But the Raiders could not run the ball effectively. At the beginning of the game, the offensive line was, I don't know, for whatever reason, they were not opening up holes for Zamir White. And so not the 49ers. The Raiders had to, I guess they started out early in like passing on early downs and then running. And then at a certain point, they were just sort of forced to go pass heavy because they were not penetrating the Chargers defensive line. And Mike, I do want to say this to you personally. I was wrong about Alexander Mattison. I'm wrong. I've told you in the past I didn't think he was that good, but I think he was better than Zamir White in this game. Whether or not he's a better running back overall, I mean, we have all season to sort of determine that, but I think Alexander Mattison was nice today. The hurdle that he made and went for the touchdown, that was nice. Alexander Mattison, I mean, props to you.
I think he is a good number 2 running back. It just expecting him to be that good week in and week out as a number 1 running back is just not wise, and that's what happened to the Vikings last year. I think from the perspective of comparing him, Alexander Mattison, to Zamir White, Mattison is a slightly better overall, all-around running back, whereas Zamir White is sort of just I think he's kind of he's a one-trick pony sort of running back, and I think he can be really good at his one trick, which is, like you said, running up the gut, being sort of a power back, and like I don't mind Zamir White. I shouldn't say I like the combo of them. I'm fine with it,
Mm-hmm.
I think if they're going to be in, negative game scripts where they're losing by 10 plus, you're going to see a lot more Alexander Mattison in the game. And I remember telling you personally after our fantasy draft, because you took Zamir White in like what, the 7th or 8th round of the draft?
Dude, I might have taken him in the 5th. I reached for him.
I think it might have been the 6th. Yeah, I think it might have been the 6th at the highest. But point being, I told you after the draft when we were talking about our teams, I said, I'm not so sure about the Zamir White pick because I saw a stat that showed that Luke Getsy is pretty notorious for having a rotation at running back. And not only for having a rotation, but also like splitting drives. So like Zamir White might get the first 2 drives and Alexander Mattison will come in on 3rd downs, pretty fair. But then the 3rd drive, it's just Alexander Mattison. And then if he needs a break, Zamir White comes in for a play or 2, and then Mattison comes back in. And it'll be almost 50-50. Like that, like after the final preseason game, that's what I came to expect because I was like, dude, Mattison was in quite a bit. But then like the Vikings game, I think Zamir White came in like the late 2nd quarter, if not early 3rd quarter. And I was like, all right, if he's our starter, he should not be in right now. Like, I understand if they wanted to get him the game rep of like a goal line carry, which I expect Zamir White to be the goal line back. But if they want to pass on 3rd and 3 on the goal line, it'll probably be Mattison, So
Yeah.
I do think it's a pretty 50-50 thing here. And if they're going to be losing in games like probably next week, I would expect more Mattison. So,
yeah,
and
no,
to your point,
I anticipate if it's going to be losing game scripts, Alexander Mattison is probably going to be the guy who is going to be in the game more.
Yeah.
Whether or not he'll be efficient, like I think his skill set is more set up for, passing downs. And when you're trailing in a game, you need to pass the ball.
Yeah, and I wonder if he's better at pass blocking, which would be a big reason why he'd be in on pass downs. But just to give you some stats, Zamir White, 13 carries, 44 yards, 3.4 yards average, and a long of 12 yards, like the longest rush for him. And that, which having a 12-yard rush on 1 out of 13 carries and you only get 44, that's pretty bad. Like that helped bump his average. He was probably averaging more like 3.3 yards per carry.
Zamir?
Zamir White, yeah. Until that 12-yard rush, And then Alexander
Yeah.
Madison, 5 carries, 19 yards, 3.8, per rush average, a long of 7 yards. So obviously Madison isn't going to run the ball as much, but he might actually get more usage. Like he played in more snaps than Zamir White in this game.
Yeah, like here's the thing. I feel like Zamir White kind of got thrown under the bus in this game by the offensive line because they couldn't get anything going. There was it wasn't that Zamir White was messing up. Like there was one play in the game I think where he made the wrong cut, and I think Tony Romo, alluded to that, but that was like later in the game. But there was just nowhere to run, and I think somebody said it. Lecky in the comments said the offensive line got manhandled yesterday, and that. I mean, that's the truth. That's exactly what I saw. So,
Yeah.
In terms of like the passing game, I thought Brock Bowers looked really nice, but in my notes, his first catch was like in the middle of the second quarter. Maybe there was like 7 minutes left. And what took so long to get him going? Because literally after they finally started passing it to Bowers, the offense actually started to move down the field and like open up a little bit. Like they were getting kind of chunk plays.
Yeah, I would say the same about Devontae because it felt like it was pretty not late, but like he might not have gotten a catch till the second quarter too. And I think part of that was just because they couldn't really get the ball moving until I think the final drive of the first quarter where Madison got the touchdown. But it might have just been like Myers, Zamir White, and then eventually Madison to get the touchdown, as far as who got them down the field. But yeah, no, I mean, Bowers looked good. He also led the team in targets, which was a little shocking to me for his first game. I thought that was interesting. But, perhaps he was just the guy that was open in this game. There were some plays where I think Minshew probably should have thrown it to Devontae, but he didn't. There was one specifically where he just quickly ran up the gut when Devontae ended up being open, maybe 10 yards downfield. Jacoby Myers looked amazing, like really, really good in this game. Same as usual.
He always looks pretty good.
Yeah,
but
just underrated.
Who was it that you said was probably just open more in this game before you mentioned Devontae?
I think it was Devontae.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Just there were plays where Devontae was open, I think, and Minshew did not go to him. But I mean, I would say the biggest takeaway for me as far as like the pass catchers is that Brock Bowers led the team in receiving and targets, receptions, not yards, but still, like he had a very good game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The biggest problem with the Raiders was just, I think the offensive line was getting bullied, and then so they couldn't do anything on offense. I want to give a shout out to the Raiders defense because aside from like when they were gassed in the end and like that long J.K. Dobbins run, I really think that the defense played their ass off and made the Chargers look like they weren't that good of a football team. And maybe they will be, but the Raiders defense, like what, the Chargers didn't get their first touchdown until what, later in the game? Or
yeah, I think they went to halftime up 7-3. So they probably didn't get their first touchdown until the third quarter.
I think it was 7-6. I think it was 7-6.
Yeah, I think
because there was a field goal off of the backwards pass by Minshew?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, okay, so I'm almost there in my notes. So I just really want to say Patrick Graham gets a plus for the game because his defense played their ass off, and so uh, another thing I want to say, I thought Crosby played pretty well. I almost made this joke last week, and you stopped me before I made the joke about like the whole Crosby Joe Alt thing and like Joe Alt's son's name, blah blah blah. I'm not going to go there. Joe Alt was a top draft pick and looked very solid in his debut. And Max Crosby was still making an impact on the game, even though when he did line up against Joe Alt, like he wasn't getting pressures according to the numbers, right? There were a couple where he would have gotten to the quarterback, but Herbert threw it quickly, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So, like I'm not trying to make excuses for Max Crosby. Obviously, you and I have exchanged our fair share of jabs and jokes in the group chat, and like Crosby still had a good game. There was one play in particular where he went to the entire other side where it was either J.K. Dobbins or Gus Edwards was rushing to the left side. Max Crosby was coming off the right side of the offensive line and just throws him down. Do you know the play that I'm talking about? Like it wasn't a tackle for a loss, but it was like maybe a 1 yard gain.
Yeah, I might, but I really don't remember off the top of my head. I just know, to me, my opinion, Max Crosby is the best defensive end in football when it comes to defending the run. And he looked really, really like what I really enjoyed the most out of this game was seeing him doing stunts with Christian Wilkins. That was when Max Crosby was getting his pressures.
Yeah, Joel says Wilkins also looked really good. By the way, I'm not ignoring the other comments. We'll get to those, in a minute. But this was like the perfect timing to bring up this one that just came in. Yeah, Christian Wilkins. I mean, at the beginning of the game, I will say, like, I guess you have to be that way as a defensive lineman. But do you remember the text that I sent to the group chat where I was like, man, the Raiders are kind of playing dirty? I was rewatching the game. It was kind of just Christian Wilkins.
Yeah, Christian Wilkins is just
there was a false start or something on the offense. They snapped the ball to Herbert, but like the play was blown dead, and Christian Wilkins is like still putting his hands in the offensive lineman's face / neck area, pushing him back. And then after that, there was a play where there was a fumble, and one of the linemen hopped on the fumble, and Christian Wilkins like could have just tagged him down, but like decided to like hit him. Like if you didn't see the play, I want you to imagine there's that notorious Rob Gronkowski play where there was an interception and the player goes down like out of bounds, and then Gronk just fucking like throws his body into him and like what are you doing?
Yeah.
There's no need for that. Like have the aggression when it's warranted, but as a defensive lineman, like you probably just have to be on level 100 at all times in order to be that violent. So he's a great player, whatever works for him. I didn't care for the antics of it, but I guess I kind of understand. Maybe you just have to be there mentally.
I think this is in part along with just him being a dominant defensive tackle in the NFL, but everything that you just described is why I think Christian Wilkins is the perfect partner on the interior for Max Crosby. I think that the two of them will just continue to rile each other up, and the energy will stay at 100 the entire game, as is expected with Max Crosby. But I think Wilkins is a rare defensive tackle where he has that the entire game, and he's like he means it in a way of like, I want to kick your ass, but also like he's kind of being funny. Like if you ever seen him on like the mic'd up stuff, like he's joking around like the entire time, but once the whistle blows, in the sense that the play is starting, like it's like he sees red or something, dude. It's funny, but also just very fun to watch.
I need to watch the mic dubs. But yeah, Joel chimes in on the Wilkins talk. He says Wilkins plays until the whistle is over. You always see him chasing receivers down. I love it.
Yeah, we'll
I
probably
would-
get to the.
I would probably love it too.
Yeah, we'll probably
I
get to
guess
the
it-
fight later at the end of the game that happened. But
Yeah,
Wilkins and Crosby were a part of that fight, and again we'll get to it. But Wilkins had me cracking up. I'll
Mhm.
say that right now.
Yeah, I need to rewatch that fight. Because they didn't. I was watching like the condensed replay, and they completely like stripped that from it.
Yeah,
I do remember I saw it yesterday, but I might have been like distracted while it happened, and I wasn't able to like fully see. I know Jack Jones and the Chargers player was it Josh Palmer? They both got tossed.
they got
So,
ejected.
yeah, but in terms of like that Christian Wilkins play, I guess it's not the same because Fred Warner doesn't play around on the field, but there have been a couple plays that you have for sure pointed out, and like you kind of think Fred Warner is a dirty player, and I do think there are moments where I mean that's just dirty. Like there was an interception, Matthew Stafford's back is turned, and he just trucks him.
Yeah, I would say Fred Warner is a great player who makes some dirty plays, and from what I saw yesterday of Christian Wilkins, I didn't see anything that was dirty.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was a lot of just high intensity, kind of setting the tone plays.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, no, I can agree with that. So, all right. I gave my props to Patrick Graham. The Minshew backwards pass. So it looked like he was throwing to someone who wasn't there. I'm not sure if it was a miscommunication. Did Devontae Adams run the wrong route? Like, was he supposed to not be upfield? Was he supposed to be at the line of scrimmage? Or was Minshew just trying to throw it to where Devontae was, but the ball just slipped? Like, I don't know. It looked like they showed this one angle, and then he's sort of looking towards like where the line of scrimmage is, like but behind the line of scrimmage. And then, like Devontae's clearly upfield a couple yards. And then it looked like Minshew was trying to pull the ball back, but it slipped. Right. That's kind of what it looked like to me. Miscommunication. What do you think, Mike?
First off, I haven't seen a play like this since I was playing middle school baseball, when I witnessed an outfielder, get a ground ball in. Again, this kid's probably 12 years old. Go like this to throw the ball to second base, and go like this, and the fucking ball goes this way. I still don't know how it happened. It was the most hilarious thing I had ever seen. I just watched a pro quarterback playing for the Raiders do that, and I nearly turned the game off. It's like I'm not actually being serious. It was like the second quarter. I'm not going to turn the game off, but trust me, I wanted to. I think you're probably right that. So first off, I saw a play that I think was similar to this. This might just be a Luke Getsy thing in the preseason, but it was Aiden O'Connell, and he didn't throw the ball, like a 12-year-old outfielder. He threw the ball to the receiver. In fact, I think it was back-to-back plays where one went to Jacoby Myers. I think it was against the Vikings, and he made the guy miss. He caught the ball. It was a first read, snap, and throw play. That's all. It might have even been an RPO where it was like fake handoff, throw it to the first read. And I think based off of what the coverage is showing, Aiden O'Connell made the choice of, I'm not even going to fake the handoff. I'm throwing it to Jacoby Myers because they're playing like soft coverage or something. Let's just get him out there in an open space and let him do the rest. And he made a cut. Guy missed almost first time he tripped up. Whatever. Next play, he threw it to Christian Wilkerson. Wilkerson tried to do the exact same thing, and this is the difference between Jacoby Myers and Christian Wilkerson. Wilkerson did not make the guy miss. He got tackled for like no gain. But point being, same thing. Snap, fake handoff, or even maybe don't even fake the handoff. First read, throw it immediately. Let the receiver go make a play. Personally, I'd rather have like a blocker there to guide him or help him. There was a really good. This is totally off topic. There was a really good play by the Rams last night against the Lions, where you had Cooper Kupp and some other receiver, and then Stafford, calls motion. Guy comes over and it's trips on the left. Hike. Stafford gets the ball. The two receivers take 2 steps forward. Cooper Kupp was in the middle of them, takes 1 step back. First read, straight to Cooper Kupp. He gets the ball. There are 2 corners there, and maybe the nickel was inside. The receivers perfectly blocked it. He ran right in between them, got like an 11-yard gain. I was like, that chef's kiss, dude. I love that shit. So I don't know what this whole like throw it to the first read receiver with absolutely no blockers is about from Luke Getsy. But to get to my point, I think that's what was going on. And my guess, because I didn't even care who the receiver was. I didn't care where he was. I didn't care what the defender looked like. I was just amazed that a pro quarterback just did this for my franchise, team in a real game, week 1. But my hunch is that whoever the receiver was, if it was Devontae, like you're saying, or whoever, it was a first read, throw it to him. And maybe when he looked, he went, oh shit, can't throw that, and tried to pull it back. And it was too, like his fingers were slipping, sweaty, whatever it is, and it went out backwards. That's my guess, is that it was tight coverage, and he realized if I throw this pass, it's a pick 6. That's my best guess.
Yeah, I mean, his eyes were kind of like I said, I saw this angle, and his eyes were looking kind of behind the line of scrimmage. Like he was looking at Devontae, and then he looked back, and like, I just don't know. Like he saw Devontae there. Like I don't know. It was just kind of weird.
But Devontae was upfield?
Devontae was up like 1 or 2 yards.
I don't know if it's a miscommunication or what, but I mean, if it's a first read play, I don't know why. I just don't know why it happened. The only thing that would make sense to me is the defender was playing way tighter coverage than he expected. And he was like, fuck that. And it was too late,
Yeah. And that can be one of those things that like we talked about where I think that Minshew is better off script. So maybe he was trying to make something off script, like pull it back. Like, I can't throw that, and avoid disaster. Whereas Aiden O'Connell maybe would have just like zipped it there.
Yeah.
And just ran the play.
Yeah.
And we'll talk maybe about Aiden O'Connell in a little bit. But I do want to get back to these notes. Zamir White looked good on the drive that he fumbled, but obviously he ended up fumbling. Like he was finally able to get some running room. And then
they were finally developing the run like well, and then he fumbles and it just killed the momentum.
Yeah, and then Zamir White looked good on the drive after the fumble as well. The offensive line was finally opening up holes, which allowed the offense to get into a rhythm, and it opened up the passing game, and the ball was actually moving down the field for what felt like the first time in the game.
Right, at least since the Madison touchdown, yeah.
Well, yeah, but Madison kind of like they were able to move the ball a little bit, like little by little, and then Madison just kind of took it and put the team on his back on that play because he made like 2 defenders miss and then went in for the touchdown, right?
I'll say this before your next note. Just going back for a second to that Minshew fumble backwards pass mishap that he had, literally up until that point, like we were just coming off the Madison touchdown drive, and it was like, oh man, we're kind of moving a little bit here. Like this looks good. Not only that, Minshew at that time in the game, I want to say he was like 10 for 12 or like 8 for 10 passing. And I was literally in my head, I thought of Thanos saying to like Thor or no, to Nebula, his daughter who he like tortured and shit. He says to Nebula, perhaps I treated you too harshly. Like I was like, dude, he's like 80% completion percentage. He's moving the ball downfield. I literally said to myself, perhaps I treated you too harshly. And then he throws the ball backwards and fumbles and the charge. I was like, fuck this guy. I don't care. Like, it was just, I was like, yeah, no, never mind. I did not treat you too harshly. This dude's a fucking joke.
Yeah. Pia's dad says 7-6 at halftime instead of the Raiders 14-3 before the half. I feel the Raiders were on top until number 15 flopped, obviously, throwing to the invisible man.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, had they had kept the offense moving downfield, and they score a touchdown, yeah, it could have been 14-6 or even it might have been 14-3 going into halftime. It's just, I think, spoilers here, I'm sure we would probably get to it at the end of this Raider talk here, but just I think the Raiders beat themselves in this game. I don't think the Chargers were all that impressive. Yes, their defensive line, I think Khalil Mack got to Colton Miller on the right plays, right? And then Joey Bosa forced a fumble or two. Their defensive line seemingly overpowered the Raiders' offensive line, especially in the run game, I would say. But then again, Khalil Mack against Colton Miller on passing plays, he got some sacks. It's just the turnovers, dude. The Zamir White fumbling and Minshew fumbling before the half. Those were like the plays that changed the game. And then the final one was just like the nail in the coffin,
Yeah, so let me get back to this. So
Yeah.
Zamir White looked good on the drive that he fumbled, and then the Raiders got the ball back. Zamir White looks good again. Offense is finally clicking, ball's moving, and then guess what happens, Mike? Do you remember what happened?
What, this third quarter?
Yes.
Perhaps
Daniel
an interception?
Carlson misses a field goal.
Yeah. Huh.
That
I forgot about
drive,
that.
they're finally moving down the field. Carlson, who's typically one of those lights out kickers, misses a field goal. So a little bit of momentum going towards the Chargers' way. And this kind of fits the theme of what you said about the Raiders beating themselves.
Yep.
What
was the score at that point? Do you know?
I want to say that it was probably 7-10 at that point. Or
7-13.
7-9. 7-9 probably.
Oh, yes, you're right. Yep.
And then so that would have put the Raiders ahead. Yeah, I think it was 7-9. That would have put the Raiders ahead, but it didn't. And so the Chargers have the ball. And late in the third quarter, the defense is noticeably gassed. They're sort of giving up all these, chunk plays. And then in the fourth quarter, this was one of the few mistakes that I think Patrick Graham made, but blitzing Divine Diablo off the edge was a poor decision. And I'll say why. I think the Chargers were definitely they were struggling in the pass game, right?
Yeah.
And J.K. Dobbins was in the game. And if you're going to blitz Divine Diablo off the edge, Dobbins is primarily a run up the gut kind of player because he's had so many leg injuries and doesn't have the outside zone speed that maybe he used to. There was a moment where he ran up the middle later in the game and then bounced it outside and was able to pick up a huge gain. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but yeah, I just think that was a mistake that just costed them right there, and so it was a risky blitz, I would say, in that situation.
Yeah, I think up until that point in the game, the Raiders defense, dude, they were getting the necessary stops. Like you said, it was 7-9, so they were only forcing field goals to that, or allowing field goals to that point. And
yeah,
probably at least one, if not two of them, were coming off of turnovers where the Chargers were in plus territory. Especially the Minshew fumble before the half, that helped the Chargers greatly, and yet the Raiders were still able to stop them in the red zone. So, the defense played well. It's just, that point in the game, it's you should probably focus on stopping the run because just the base defense was getting it done against the pass. There's no need to do any cute extra shit to blitz, at Herbert and allow your, defender, allow yourself to become in a negative script against the run.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And then this was something that kind of stood out to me, but The offensive drive right after, like, the blitz that resulted in a touchdown for J.K. Dobbins. The offense on the drive right after, early on in the drive, the plays that were not working were all the like design screens and like, the Raiders were trying to like be cute. But the plays that did work, early on in the drive were when they just simply let the players make plays. Bowers had a big gain. Minshew stepping up, and finding Jacoby Myers. Like these weren't like design screens or anything like that. Like it was just drop back, let it happen. And the Raiders were able to actually pick up big yards. Then later in the drive, they get in the red zone. And then the plays that did work were the, all the design stuff. And the plays that didn't were the, letting them play. I guess it's like at a certain point, like towards the red zone, they call it the red zone for a reason, and the defense is going to like sort of anchor down a little bit. But yeah, I just took notes on that because I'm like, man, when they actually let the players, do their thing, good things happen. Because the Raiders do have talented skill position players. Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers, Devontae Adams, Zamir White. Like they are talented, but like I said, I kind of got like proven wrong a little bit later in the drive when it was, it flip flopped. So 4th and 1.
I think just quickly off of that, I think in the preview in our last week's pod, I mentioned like if the offense can just be efficient, and maybe I didn't say it quite like this, but if the play calling can just be good from Luke Getsy, like I think what really matters this season, like there might not be that big of a difference between one quarterback or the other. I think what matters is the play calling. I think Luke Getsy, the season might really be on him, and Antonio Pierce and probably whoever's playing quarterback. But I think if Luke Getsy can call the right plays, like he has the talent on the field to get it done, So I just think it comes down to the game planning and the play calling. So anyways.
Yeah. So one thing I do want to talk about is, and this is what a lot of Raider fans have been talking about, and a lot of football fans, but people have criticized this. But 4th and 1 on the 43-yard line with 7 minutes and 20 seconds left in a 16-10 ball game. Many criticize the call, but in my opinion, I think it's a sound decision logically in order to punt. They punted it instead of going for it on 4th.
Kicked a field goal.
No, I think they punted.
Is this the big decision that everybody was talking about for Antonio Pierce?
Yes.
They kicked a field goal. The reason why I say that is because they were down 2 possessions, and they were in the red zone, I want to say, and he decided on 4th and 1 to kick the field goal instead of obviously going for it.
Mm-hmm.
And we texted in the group chat about it. I'm going to pull it up, hopefully, or not for the screen, but just to kind of read it a little bit, kind of to give my thoughts here.
Okay, let me see the scoring summary, and let me get back to you on that. It was one or the other. It was one or the other, but I think it was a sound decision to not go for it on 4th and 1. So let's see, 4th quarter. Yeah, dude, this was different, Mike.
4th quarter, huh?
Yeah, 4th quarter. Because the Raiders kicked the field goal with 10:30 left.
Yeah.
Daniel Carlson hit that field goal with 10:30 left. So it's a 10-16 ball game already to that point. I even have it in my note. So 7 minutes and 20 seconds left in a 16-10 ball game. They chose to punt the ball instead of going for it on 4th and 1. And I think it was the right decision because, well, obviously they didn't win the game, so it's like, hindsight 2020.
Hindsight.
But it was the right decision to make at the time, because the Raiders defense has been playing well all game and the offense was not. if the Raiders do not convert there, you give the Chargers the ball near midfield, and 1 or 2 first downs puts the Chargers in field goal range, which puts the game at 2 possessions because, like I said, it's 10-16. Chargers kick a field goal, and guess what? That essentially ices the game.
Yeah.
The Raiders are not going to come back from a 2-possession deficit.
Yeah. Not only all of that, so I pulled up the text in the group chat, and I see Hutch saying, "Why did we punt?" So you are correct, they punted. And my response was because the Raiders were like 0 for 4 or 0 for 5 to that point in 3rd and 4th and 1 situations in that game, leading up to that moment. So it's like, what, are we magically going to get it done when the game's on the line? I don't know, dude. I just felt like it's a 1-possession game. You can punt them, pin them with your all-pro punter. The defense had been getting stops and forcing, punts to that point for the most part. So who's to say that they won't this time? And again, hindsight 2020, right?
Yep.
The problem, I think, was, and this is probably the thing that I wanted to say most in hindsight, and I didn't get to say last week, was that the worry for me going into this game was the Raiders' run defense, because in the preseason they looked pretty bad, and I just hoped, Crosby and Wilkins, they'll get it done. And maybe the other thing to note here is that Friday before the game, it was announced, Malcolm Kuntz has a knee injury. It's not looking good. He's going on IR. And, I'm pretty fucking bummed because it was apparently a non-contact. There's been mixed reporting on that. Some are saying it was a non-contact knee injury. Some are saying he's just sore. I don't know. But then, whoever the sideline reporter was at the Charger game was like, yeah, it's not looking good. He might be out for the season. And I'm like, dude, are you serious? This is the third, or well, maybe not the 3rd year in a row, but the 2nd year in a row where the starting defensive end opposite Crosby is, boom, 2 days before the season, out. And it's like, what the fuck? So, all right, cool. We have Tyree Wilson. Well, within the first drive, he bumps his knee. He's out for the game. So we were rocking with Charles Snowden and Janarius Robinson the rest of the way, which was whatever, but it's just, my point being here, that sucks. And I'm so upset about it because I was really excited about Kuntz this year, and I hope he does get to come back, but it might be too little too late at that point, whenever it is. But the rush defense was something that worried me, especially in this matchup against a Harbaugh and Greg Roman-led offense. So I think with the hindsight 2020 and all this on this punt, it's the Chargers were able to gash us down the field with J.K. Dobbins, and he broke a big one, and it was yeah, that's probably game. They're going to score. Whatever they score, it's going to be 2 possessions, and it's going to be 5 minutes left in the game, and it's over, and that's exactly what happened.
Wait,
but
so
to that point, they were stopping them.
Real quick, I time out. Is Malcolm Kuntz going to be out, you said, for most of the year?
Again, it's been kind of mixed reporting. I've seen multiple things between it was a non-contact knee injury and, his knee's just sore. Either way, they put him on IR. Now, he's eligible to return after 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But the sideline reporter for CBS said he might be out for the year.
Okay. Real quick, I do want to take it back because we had this conversation, and we've had this conversation for a couple players. We talked about Malcolm Kuntz not getting extended, right? He's one of the players that didn't get extended. And I mentioned if he's able to get a contract right now, why would you not secure that? Because in one injury, all right, whatever Kuntz was going to get, if he was going to get anything this offseason, it's risky. Maybe it would work out. But, I mean, if he would have balled out this year, or, it's still yet to be seen, balls out this year, we'll get a bigger contract. But why would you put that at risk when an injury can severely take all of that away from you? You know what I mean? Kuntz next year is going to have to get a contract, right? He was eligible for an extension this year. Next year, he is not on contract. and now his price just went down a little bit, which might be good for the Raiders if he's going to stay with the Raiders. But
Right.
like I'm talking about like in a player's individual perspective, like did the Raiders engage in contract negotiations with him and he just decided he's not going to sign, or
I just highly doubt it because I think probably both sides recognize like now is not the time because the contract's not up yet and Kuntz expects to break out further. And I think most of these players would rather bet on themselves, somewhat similar to say Jacobs, of like he wanted to play to earn his pay, and the Raiders weren't going to pay him what he wanted. So he was like, well, I'm out of here then. And I think with Kuntz now, it's like, all right, he gets injured before the season and it's unfortunate. In the reverse of what you're saying, for Kuntz, it's like, well, hindsight 2020, verbiage of the day for the Raiders, I guess. But for him, it's like, damn, maybe I should have tried to took a contract. But what would have okay, here's the thing. He would have gotten a 3-year deal, 4-year deal with the Raiders in what would have been considered cheap because under the assumption that he would have broke out this year. So let's say he accepts that deal, he doesn't get hurt, and it's a 4-year deal averaging, I don't know what the regular rate is for defensive ends right now, but let's just say $20 million is like, hey, I'm getting paid good, but if I broke out, I would have got paid like at least 25, like not as good as it could have been, right? He would get a long-term deal for that, and then he'd be playing at that rate in his peak years for less than he could have gotten. Whereas now it's like, it sucks that he gets injured. I think what he's going to do, because I'm assuming he and his agent are wise, whatever happens, whether he plays or not this year, he's going to come out into the offseason and say, wherever I go, whether I stay here or go somewhere else, I want a 1-year deal.
1-year deal.
Yes. Because I can prove it. I'm going to get paid better than I've been paid ever. And I get a year to prove, hey, I am still that good. And if he does, he's going to get paid big time. And hey, unfortunately, it's the name of the game. If he gets hurt again, then that's when it's like, well, 2 strikes, that's not looking good for you, dude. But it sucks. I hope that they do re-sign him. And I would also just say, if they had signed him to a 4-year deal prematurely, I'd be pretty fucking upset right now. Maybe we technically are still getting him at a good deal, but we're not getting him right now.
Yeah, for this year. No, I was just thinking that, like, from the Raiders' perspective of team building, that would have pissed you off. You just pay the player, and now he might not even play this year. I could see where that would piss you off. But like, I guess like to my point of like, he could come back next year, play on a 1-year deal, and dude, like, it's almost like he had his breakout last year. Sometimes you just got to cash in. It's like deal or no deal. You know what I mean? Like, man, the $1 million is still on the board, but I mean, once that $1 million is off the board, like, you just got to kind of settle. And like, I don't know. You brought up the example. I know it's not exact because you don't know like we both right now don't know the going rates of like his caliber of defensive end, but like, 20 million holding out for another year to possibly get 25 million per year. I know it's a lot of money, but like, for a couple million to have that guarantee. But that's another topic for another time. I just wanted to bring that up, because we had just talked about it recently about like players. It's like, all right, yeah, next year I can get more money, but it's like, if money's being offered now, like, I almost feel like, how could you say no? Like, this is for sure.
Right.
But I don't know if that money was being offered, but he was eligible for an extension. And obviously the Raiders look smart for not engaging in those talks.
Yeah, I think to kind of summarize my feelings is just I think both sides probably realize like, now's just not the right time for either side. It just doesn't make sense. Like, I get the like, oh, maybe you should cash in, but I think usually that the way that would be is like, a star player asking for a raise or like more guarantees. Whereas he's still on his rookie deal. I don't even know if he can do that. I really don't know how it works. Unfortunately, but I just think I don't know. I don't think there was any talks of getting him paid because I think both sides realized like, yeah, it's premature for both ends. So,
Mhm.
and I have something in relation to this, but I'm going to save it for the end.
Okay.
So,
But going back, this is where we left off. We were talking about the 4th and 1 where they decided to punt in the fourth quarter, around 7 minutes, 20 seconds left, 16-10 ball game. Can you, just to sort of wrap up, I'm not going to repeat everything that I said, but like, can you blame Antonio Pierce for having more faith in his defense than his offense? Because I
well,
surely don't.
I absolutely not. I know we were just on the topic of the punt. I agreed with the call. I agreed with the call because I knew that they were like 0 for 4 on 3rd and 4th and 1. And if you don't get that 4th down, like the Chargers have house money to win this game. You're handing it to them. So at least punting them with your all-pro punter and your stud top 10 defense, it's like you probably have a better chance of getting yourself in a plus situation. And also, like, in my opinion, like, okay, let's say you get the 4th and 1 and you get to go down the field and you're down 6. You kick a field goal. Okay, worst case scenario, right? I guess in this scenario, you kick a field goal. Now you're down 3. All right. Well, now the Chargers have the ball with 4 minutes left, and you have, I'm assuming, still 3 timeouts, like 2 first downs, and you might still be screwed. Like my opinion was like, let's punt it now, give them the ball. If you can get a stop, you're gonna need a touchdown to win, but you can put yourself in a situation where you could time this game out and not give the ball back to Herbert in a 2-minute drill to allow him to win the game. That's the way I felt.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, obviously they decide to punt, and then the Raiders defense is holding on until Dobbins had his huge run where he ran up the middle and then bounced it to the left side and found the opening. And it's like, I really feel like the Raiders had so many opportunities to win this game, and they were containing the Chargers the entire way through, and then you can only hold a team for so long. And I'm happy for J.K. Dobbins because of how, for him specifically, like, I don't know. I'm happy for him because he has been through hell and back the past couple of years with the lower leg injuries. And then obviously, like, I'm happy for him because I chose him on my fantasy team as well. So maybe there's that like little bias there. But Dobbins had the huge run. McConkey had the touchdown. And that was the ball game. Nothing else after that mattered.
Yeah, and there was an interception that was forced by Khalil Mack, but I would say I think it's Joel said in the comments like Colt Miller was getting overpowered by Mack. I think I alluded to that earlier, but it's unfortunate to see. I don't think that's going to be an every week thing with Colt Miller. I think Raider fans know well and good that Khalil Mack is a great power rusher. And we saw that last year when he got like 6 sacks on the Raiders in like week 4. So I just think maybe it's possible Colt Miller, who was out the entire offseason coming back from a shoulder surgery, maybe Khalil Mack week 1 wasn't the best matchup for him in like his, first game being healthy, and getting back into the groove of things. I think give Colt Miller a week or 2. He'll be back to his old self. I don't know who the Ravens' top pass rusher is, but perhaps he might get Colt Miller next week too. But I'm not freaking out about Colt Miller.
Yeah, and then I guess I kind of anticipated this going into the game because I know Khalil Mack is a great football player. We've seen him you have seen him firsthand be a great football player on the Raiders. And it's been some time since then. It's been like, 7 years since he's been a Raider?
Counting.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think it's been 7 years. Because 2017, right? Was his final season on the Raiders? Because Gruden's first year was 2018. And
Yeah, I
Gruden
mean
got rid of him.
that checks out. It's too dark of a memory for me to seep back into.
Yeah, sorry for bringing up the repressed memories, but uh, I've seen Jim Harbaugh firsthand take a team that just doesn't win, has the wrong, they just have the wrong game plan, wrong approach, revive a quarterback who just can't win. All right, Alex Smith though was terrible. Justin Herbert is a top 5 quarterback in my opinion. No worse than top 10.
I
Justin
agree.
Herbert is the real deal. There was one incompletion. I think he made the wrong decision, but he threw it and it hit Quentin Johnston on like a jump ball right in the hands, and like he couldn't come down with it. And I'm like, man, that pass is it's so beautiful to watch. But
Yeah.
I anticipated that Harbaugh was going to have the Chargers ready to go, and he was going to get the most out of his stars because I've seen that firsthand. He did it with, Alex Smith wasn't a star before then, but he did it with Alex Smith. Patrick Willis was a star, but Patrick Willis only got so much better. Navarro Bowman got so much better. He's the linebacker coach right now with the Chargers. The 49ers got Alden Smith. I want to say Harbaugh's first or second year, and Alden Smith was fantastic. Justin Smith was fantastic. And then, I mean, Harbaugh is a trenches coach. Like I know he's a quarterback kind of guru, but he always puts his emphasis on the trenches, and it showed. I think in week 1 because Max Crosby wasn't able to get home as as much as we probably anticipated, and like he did get like a sack or two. There was one where I can remember off the top of my head where Justin Herbert was like left standing up and like the pocket collapsed on him. But, um, the defensive line played good, eliminated the Raiders run game, and then for the most part held up in pass protection. And I at least anticipated that because I think Harbaugh's a hell of a coach. And I know you're just tired of hearing me talk about Harbaugh.
Yeah, I'm glad we don't play them until week 18 when the season probably won't matter anymore. I would say my comments on Harbaugh and the Chargers would just be, I said in the group chat because Tyler's a Charger fan, I wasn't too impressed by the Chargers. I think they actually might have had more penalties than the Raiders in this game. Yes, their offensive line held up well. I think in large part because, yes, he emphasized the trenches. His first round pick was a pretty obvious pick in Joe Alt. Very athletic, like kind of the perfect offensive tackle prospect. If they needed a left tackle, he would have been their left tackle. Like he's just that good. He had a good day against Max Crosby. Like you said, specifically for me, like had Herbert held onto the ball longer, perhaps you would have some coverage sacks, from Crosby. But, mostly what was working for the Raiders were stunts, and I want to see more of that. But I wouldn't exactly put it like, oh, Harbaugh had the Chargers so ready to win this game. I just think the Raiders just coughed this game up, And I think as the season progresses, we'll really see what this Chargers team is. And that's not to like throw a dig at Harbaugh. It's more just like, I just think the offensive talent not at offensive tackle surrounding Justin Herbert is not that good. McConkey, cool. He's like Hunter Renfrow to me. Like, that's cool, but he's not supposed to be your top receiver. He should be the number 2, option behind a really good number 1, and they don't have that number 1 right now. And then the running backs, like, hey, Dobbins had a great game. That breakaway run for most running backs would be game-clinching touchdown.
Yep.
He got stopped after 50 yards, and that's because of the leg injuries for him. And hey, he's a great running back when it comes to reading the holes. And if their offensive line is going to be good at, run blocking, which I'm sure they will be under Harbaugh and Greg Roman, it'll work for them. It's just, I guess point being, I don't think they're going to be like this 11-win team. I just think they're going to win the close games because of, say, a Harbaugh and a Herbert. Whereas in previous years, they were losing those close games because of their coaching,
Yep.
And that's the I think that's the best I can give to Harbaugh right now. Whereas in 2 years, when he actually has his full print on this team, I would expect them to be really good, you know? And maybe now is the right time. I'm assuming you're kind of done with your notes, right?
Yeah, I'm done with the notes.
Okay.
And then just to sort of cap off, I think like all right, the score, if you did not watch the game, 22-10. The game was much closer the entire way through, and the Raiders had them. The Raiders had them, and literally just the Raiders shot themselves in the foot one too many times, and the game sort of slipped away from them. But literally, the Raiders could have scored the go-ahead touchdown, but they did choose to punt 4th and 1, which you and I both agreed that was a sound decision. We're not disagreeing with that. Obviously, if Antonio Pierce knows, hey, my defense is going to uncharacteristically give up a scoring drive right here, he's not going to do it. He'll probably take the chance on 4th and 1.
Yep.
But he was just assuming that he was going to see the exact same thing that he's seen the entire game, that the defense is going to lock down the Chargers. But
Yep.
it didn't go that way. So
Yep.
It was a close game, and the Chargers, went out on top. And I think we've had some comments sitting. I do want to get to them. I think right now is a good time, and then we'll finish up our thoughts.
Yeah, I'd say we'll get through the comments, and I just have one last point, mostly relating to Jim Harbaugh.
Okay. Well, we can get to the Jim Harbaugh thing on one of these comments. I'll bring it up in a second. But Lucky says, I'm a Raiders fan, and all I got to say is SMH. Shake my head. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you there.
It was a winnable game.
It's a winnable game, and I think I said this in the group chat. Week 1 is like a good, at least to me, it's just the week to kind of get a feel for the team.
It's a measuring stick.
It's a measuring stick sort of game, and it's not final like last year. I mean, we beat the Broncos last year in week 1, and it was like, oh shit, but Garoppolo had this weird game where he almost kind of lost the game, and the defense kept him in it. And at that point, we didn't know the defense was as good as it was. But point being, after 5 weeks, you really know your team, and it's like, oh man, we're garbage last year. And then they fire the coach, and hey, it ended up kind of all right? Like they didn't make the playoffs, but it ended up way better, and we have optimism going into the offseason. This game really brought me down on the optimism, and I was already coming into the season pretty low on optimism. The vibes were low is what I kept saying. The vibes are low. I'm not digging this quarterback thing going on here, yada, yada. I just think the way that they lost this game, it just felt like this season is going to get ugly,
Mm-hmm.
And in the sense of I can't say yet whether or not Antonio Pierce is going to be on the hot seat at the end of the season. I'm not going to say anything like that quite yet, but just this quarterback room is, we've said it multiple, it's going to hold us back, dude. And, if they're going to get gashed through the run on defense, if that's what's going to be the kind of oh, their pass defense is good, but the run defense, man, fuck. If your offense isn't scoring enough points to for Zamir White to be running the ball, that means that the other team is going to be out there with probably the lead, and they're going to be running the ball. And then eventually they're going to break the big one, and it's going to keep the same thing's going to keep happening over and over. And you tack on the turnovers. If the Raiders don't win the turnover battle, or I should more specifically, if the Raiders keep losing the turnover battle in these games because of Minshew and whatever else, they will continue to lose and lose and lose. Mm-hmm. That's where I'm at.
Real quick, I do want to get to this comment. I'll kind of bump this up to the front of the line, but Anthony Aguilar, comments. I want to say this might be his first time checking out the channel. Thank you for checking out the stream. And, you bring up a lot of, interesting and perhaps valid points, but I do disagree with a couple of the sentiments here. He says, the Raiders didn't have a chance. Why are we pretending like they did? They had no quarterback, an inexperienced offensive line, and an unproven coach. Come on now. Let's be real here. So one thing I will say is, we watched the game. The Raiders did have a chance to win the game in the end, but obviously they didn't. You know, uh, that's not pretending. That's actually the way that it played out. In terms of them having no quarterback, Mike, you and I can agree the Raiders have a quarterback problem, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think the Raiders have that great of an offensive line, and I think they showed it on Sunday.
Yes, but they're not inexperienced.
No, yeah,
Only,
they're
okay.
pretty.
Only the right tackle was inexperienced, and yet he started a few games last season, Thayer Munford, and he came in and he, I would say, I guess, won the right tackle job. But he is a veteran, whereas the rookie third-round pick DJ Glaze did not win the job. He is not starting. And at left guard, you have Cody Whitehair, a very experienced offensive lineman, starting over a second-round rookie in Jackson Powers Johnson, who is still getting up to speed. So inexperienced, not quite. Maybe. Maybe I can agree with inexperienced in the sense that they changed the offensive line scheme. That might have an effect because they switched to zone or gap or whatever it is when they used to be power. I think. Don't quote me there, but I think they switched from power to like a zone or gap scheme. Maybe that had an effect on Colton Miller, and maybe power was better for him. Maybe power was better for Andre James. Maybe power was better for not Thayer Munford, but the right guard. Why am I forgetting? Donald Parham.
Anthony, he goes into further detail. Inexperienced as a unit and scheme, just sort of clears that up.
Yeah,
but
scheme for sure. Yeah.
In terms of unproven coach, so I had this discussion with Mike literally the entire offseason practically, because I sort of thought the Raiders should reach out, for Jim, at least try and lure Jim Harbaugh in because he's an experienced coach. He literally just won the college national championship, and he has success taking, a team that doesn't necessarily have a quarterback, or maybe has a quarterback that just needs to be guided in the right direction and can make it work. And he gets the most out of his players. But, the Raiders were in a position where, Antonio Pierce was 5-4 last year. And the players really wanted Antonio Pierce to be head coach. And it got to a point, I think, in the offseason where, Max Crosby made it very clear that's who his pick was. And I think that was the sentiment in the locker room. They want AP. And I'm not saying Antonio Pierce didn't earn the job, but for me personally, outside looking in, do I think that he blew me away? No, I don't think that he blew me away. I think there was one impressive win, and that was against the Kansas City Chiefs. And so, all right, them having an unproven coach, they were still in this ball game. It's not like they didn't have a chance, but I did, if you want to check out our show last week or whatever, but I did predict that the Chargers were going to win this game. Mike predicted the Raiders were going to, but look at him. Look at the way he's dressed, how could he not? It's the first game of the season, and they honestly, they were in it. They were in it, and I think Harbaugh and Herbert were, for me, the difference in the game why I chose the Chargers to win. And that's probably ultimately if Herbert was not winning, if Herbert was not in the game, maybe it's another Easton Stick game like last year where it's 63-21. Last season they had, was that after Josh McDaniels just got fired and they won by that much?
I want to say,
or was that later on?
Giants game was the first Antonio Pierce game.
Okay,
and
so it wasn't the first one.
Chargers game was in December. Giants was probably early November, if I had to guess.
Yeah, but it wasn't the first one. So that was
no.
Kind of what I was getting on. But I do think yes, they definitely have a quarterback problem. No, and you can toss that up or I guess dice that as they have no quarterback. Semantics. Inexperienced offensive line with the scheme, absolutely. Unproven coach, yes. Did they have a chance to win? I think so. I think they showed that they had a chance to win, but I didn't think they were going to win.
Yeah, I think there are 63 reasons why they had a chance to win. Granted, I know in that game last year where the Chargers were embarrassed by in my opinion, worse Raiders team last season, they did not have their franchise quarterback. And I agree with that, I think if Herbert's in that game, maybe they're able to continue on drives and the Raiders aren't able to score as much. Just, man, that game was an absolute, shellacking. I don't know.
Yeah. And Anthony says here, I think AP brings that tough mentality and the I'm going to punch you in the mouth mentality, but he was a pressure hire by the players. I kind of agree with that. I feel like I kind of almost said that. When the second half started, we saw a shift in adjustments by Jim. Yeah, I mean, I think, well, not I think, I pretty much know that Jim Harbaugh is a better candidate, but to my knowledge, the Raiders did reach out to Jim Harbaugh and he was not interested. And if he's like, obviously the Raiders, I got something in my eye. The Raiders could have made a better effort, to entice him money-wise to come, but it could just be he's like, I'm not going to the Raiders. And so in my opinion, if it was not Jim Harbaugh, I'd say you stick with Antonio Pierce. I didn't like anyone else out there. Antonio Pierce was the right hire to make if it wasn't Jim Harbaugh. And so if you are going to hire Antonio Pierce, like, I'm sorry to say, he can't get experience overnight. It's going to be a process where he does get experience. And I'd say the thing that he has going for him right now is his players like to play for him.
Yeah, I'm sure that there were quite a few adjustments led by Jim Harbaugh in this game. I can't help but double down on the Raiders beat themselves in this game with the turnovers. One that was legitimately, to your point of the no QB, like Gardner Minshew gave up that fumble that allowed the Chargers to get a second field goal and make it a pretty close game going into halftime at 7-6, Raiders leading the game. And then, to your point of we saw a shift in adjustments by Jim, the second half, the Chargers clearly beat the Raiders, right? But again, like Zamir White fumbling, great play by Joey Bosa. But the Raiders were driving. And I don't know if the score was 9-10 or whatever the score was, but if they go down and score a touchdown, this game's completely different. I just think I appreciate you coming on the pod, and I'd like to hear from you again. I just think in the previous comment or the first comment of like, why are we acting like the Raiders had a chance? Well, for one, it's week 1. We don't really fucking know anything. I do agree with you that the Raiders quarterback situation is pretty bad, and it's probably top 3 worst in the league, up there with the Giants and maybe the Panthers, dude. I don't know what's going on with them. But, the Raiders clearly need a franchise quarterback. And in my opinion, that's all it would take. Maybe a better offensive coordinator. Like, to my point earlier of, like, this season might really ride on Luke Getsy. Maybe having the franchise quarterback paired with, like, the franchise offensive play caller who maybe should be the head coach. I don't know. That's big. But to say that the Raiders had no chance in this game, that if the Raiders had won this game, that would be like me saying that the Chargers had no chance in this game. In hindsight, it's like, no, the Chargers had a chance. They're a better coach team this year than last year, and Herbert's healthy and all this shit. Like, to the Raiders side, it's like, well, their defense is in theory better with Christian Wilkins, and
Mhm.
Go,
Real
Mute.
quick, Anthony says, "I'm just happy for the future with the Chargers. Good luck to the Miners." Yeah, obviously the Niners. And nothing personal to the Raider guy. I wish you well as a human being, but it's FTR for life. You can, you know, you can read that in your head and fill in the blanks. But Chargers are going 2-0. Yeah, the Chargers I think are going to beat the Panthers, and they will be 2-0. And honestly, I think the Chargers have a good chance to make the playoffs. We're not a Chargers channel. I see that you said that you subscribed. Like we said, we appreciate you for coming on, even though you are not a Niner fan or a Raider fan. You know, we take comments from anybody. We've had fans from all kinds of teams, and you know, we have friends who are Chargers fans. They might be the only Chargers fans that exist. You might be the third one that I know. No, I'm just playing with you. You know, playful jabs. I wish you well also as a human being, and I thank you also for checking out the channel and subscribing.
Yes. Can you put on the previous comment from him?
Yeah.
I'm perfectly fine with this. It's all fair. I appreciate it, and it is completely reciprocated as a Raider fan back to the Chargers. You know, FTC for life, and FTB and FTC for Chiefs. Like it's expected. It's fine. It's cool. Playful banter is fun. I don't know if he meant 2-0 as in the Chargers. I mean the Panthers, because that's not really a flex. I think he probably meant Week 18 against the Raiders.
Oh.
Hey, I think I thought it was interesting that it was laid out that way for this season of like bookending the season with the Chargers, because I think Week 1 and Week 18, those are two completely different teams for both sides. And, you know, maybe the Chargers will be in the playoff hunt at that point. I was going to say it. I said it to the group chat, but like I'm at the point already after 1 week, and this is usually my experience with the Raiders, but the way that they played in this game, I came out kind of pulling for like a top 5 draft pick, you know, because we need that franchise quarterback. And then I'm not like devoted to Antonio Pierce. Like if the players continue to play well for him and we win some games, cool. But like if the rumored 2-year deal for him is true, if we end out with a top 5 draft pick, I'm sure at the end of the season I would have an opinion. But right now, my prediction is that I won't be like dead set on like we need to fire him. You know, I think earning a top 5 pick. Let's say they win 6 games and that gets them the 5th overall pick. I don't know. To me, it's like, well, that's kind of part of the process and what needs to happen. We've talked about it multiple times. They need to take their medicine. They need to lose to go get that franchise quarterback because, in my opinion, as a Raider fan, not looking outside, looking in, right? They're that close. They're really that close with the current team on paper. They are that close where it's just like, just get the franchise quarterback, maybe get another corner or a new safety or something that can help with like run defense or replace Divine Diablo or somebody, you know, to help with the run defense. I don't know. Depending on how Kuntz goes and Tyree Wilson, we might need another edge defender. I don't know, but like they're really that close. Shore up the offensive line, whether it's, I think right tackle's fine, whether it's center or what. I think the offensive line is fine if Jackson Powers Johnson is good. It's just quarterback. So if they go out there and they suck this year, I won't be mad because in theory that can help us get our guy. It's just a matter of will that guy be there, you know? And then I have a point about Harbaugh, and I didn't really plan on it coming off of like a Charger fan talking to us. I really wanted to relate it to Raider fans. I mean, if you want to take the comment off the screen. Cool.
Yeah, there was another comment that I did want to put on, and real quick, Anthony just kind of responded and said, "I will say the Raiders are a decent quarterback away from being a playoff/wild card team." I can agree with that, and I do think that maybe if you add to that offensive line, that certainly would not hurt the Raiders.
Yeah, and then I would say for the Chargers, I don't know if you heard me earlier, but to Anthony, I feel like Harbaugh is probably the coach that makes the difference between losing the games in previous years and winning the games where you're close. And it's like, it's a close game to the finish, and then the Chargers choke, right? Like that's been the story besides injuries, right? It's like maybe Harbaugh is that guy who gets you those wins, those close wins that you needed to get you into the playoffs. And I don't like, I'm not expecting big things this year because, again, the talent surrounding Harbaugh or Herbert is a little suspect to me. I can't speak well for the offensive line on the interior, but the receivers, not named McConkey, and the running backs being like 30 years old and older, I think this upcoming offseason they can get that fixed and have youth surrounding Herbert, and it can be like green light means fucking go for them next season. I can really see it. I'm not expecting huge things from them this year, but that's not in like a disrespectful way. Like I think Harbaugh can definitely get big things done for them this year in comparison to your last coach in Staley. So, but yeah. And I agree with what he said about like they're really I think we said it in like the last pod. If they had Derek Carr right now, like I would expect the Raiders to win quite a few games. It would be close between like them and the Chargers, but I'd expect more wins than I do right now. So
yeah, real quick, this is the comment that I wanted to put on where you wanted to, I was like, wait, I got a comment that can segue into what you wanted to say about Jim Harbaugh. So Lecky says, overall, AP got outcoached yesterday. Now, I will say the difference between Antonio Pierce and Jim Harbaugh in this game, the biggest difference was Jim Harbaugh has Justin Herbert and Antonio Pierce does not. If you put Justin Herbert on the Raiders and Gardner Minshew on the Chargers, I think it's a different outcome for the game. Do I think Jim Harbaugh was the better coach in yesterday's game? Absolutely. But do I think Antonio Pierce like did anything that was like super, out of the ordinary? It's just I think that the other team just had a better chance to win mainly because the quarterback head coach duo. And that's not a slight at Antonio Pierce.
Yeah, I can see like to Anthony's point earlier of like, oh, Harbaugh made the necessary adjustments. It's like, yeah, I would say maybe, probably, but we can't entirely prove that. Like, it felt to me like it was a lot of the same. It's just the Raiders fucked up. They kept turning over the ball, and then they got gashed on like 2 big runs, and that was it. And then what it really comes down to for most people is that 4th and 1 punt by Antonio Pierce. And I think that you and I are clearly in the minority as far as Raider fans thinking that that was the right decision. And maybe Lecky believes that Antonio Pierce was wrong with that decision. And I'm, I think it's a fine opinion to have. I think it is very much, it's a mixture of hindsight 2020, but also like, I think in that moment before knowing that we would lose, a lot of fans felt like it was extremely conservative. And I understand that. I felt like the game, the prior 3 quarters up until that moment told me that was not going to go good if we went for it. There was a higher chance of us losing the game by going for it than by just punting it, to me. But I understand people saying like, well, if we go down and score a touchdown, maybe we win. It's like, yeah, sure. But if Herbert has the ball with 2 minutes left, it's like, then Harbaugh can just say, hey, Herbert, go do your thing, dude. And he probably does his thing because he's Justin Herbert. So but okay.
Yeah.
To my point.
A lot of time has passed between this comment. So I feel like we touched on a lot of like why the decision was sound, for them to punt it in that situation. So hopefully, Lecky, if you're still watching, I hope that you were able to catch that portion. And, I wouldn't say that Antonio Pierce was like, I don't think he did anything in particular that was like outrageous.
Yeah. So here's my point about Harbaugh and AP. Okay. Because I honestly was kind of expecting it to be brought up in this pod today, just because it's the Chargers and it's Harbaugh and the Raiders lost and it's AP and all that shit. Because I know in past podcasts, you specifically, Josh, have brought this up in large part because you're a fan of Jim Harbaugh with his time spent with the Niners, and you believe he is a probably top 5 coach in the league, right? You probably believe that.
I believe that.
And I think maybe what has been brought up is like, man, the Raiders really made a mistake not hiring Jim Harbaugh.
Mm-hmm.
Something along those lines. And I've heard something to that degree from you a few times. And I have definitely heard that specific, like the Raiders messed up not hiring Jim Harbaugh from my dad. And I'm sure that somewhere out there on the internet, in many places, it's on the internet from Raider fans saying, man, why didn't we hire Jim Harbaugh? Like, why weren't we smart enough to hire Jim Harbaugh? Why did we go with our emotions and not hire Jim Harbaugh? This is going to be, I hope, the only time that I say this. And you kind of already said it for me. But there was reporting done by one Vic Tafer who said the Raiders reached out to Jim Harbaugh or his agent or his estate, whatever you want to call it. And the response was essentially not interested. I'm summarizing there, but yeah, not interested. No thanks. You know? So any person, any Raider fan, that's why I didn't want to respond to the Anthony, the Chargers fan, is because, well, for him, it's kind of different. I'm mostly talking to Raider fans. Like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear, oh, why didn't we hire Harbaugh? Why didn't we? Who gives a fuck? He didn't want to come here. Just stop. It's so annoying. I shouldn't say it's annoying but just, I understand the idea.
Here's the thing. All right, say he's not interested in the job. Why not? Why is, like, just ask, is it Las Vegas? Is it Mark Davis? Is it the stadium? Is it Henderson, Nevada? Why not? Because he's coached for the Raiders before.
Right.
Like, what is the reason? Did they say, like, all right, they reached out. They probably did not provide a number. But if the Raiders wanted to, they could have made a strong effort, because, like, that's just kind of the way the NFL operates. Like, Deshaun Watson did not want to go to Cleveland. Cleveland's like, a fully guaranteed contract. Deshaun Watson's like, sign me up, right? I got a exclusive comment, off screen from Pia's dad, because I guess the comments aren't working for him anymore. But he says he thinks that the Raiders could have made a better offer to Harbaugh. And I kind of agree. Like, they didn't make a strong push to get him, but, like, maybe it is the case that he's just like, no matter what number you throw in his face, like, he had his mindset, I'm going to the Chargers. I want to pair up with Herbert, and the Chargers have Justin Herbert. The Raiders don't.
That would be my point. I think my opinion, my assumption is that Harbaugh had his eyes set on the Chargers because of their quarterback situation. And I think a year or two ago, Harbaugh had his eyes set on the Vikings, potentially, if not likely, because he wanted to use the Vikings as leverage on Michigan to get a new contract with Michigan, because at the end of the day, he wanted to stay there to win the national championship, which he did. Once he did that, what did he do? He went to the NFL, right? If his intent was, I want to win the college football championship, and then I want to go back to the NFL, because at the end of the day, what I want to do most is win the goddamn Super Bowl. Don't you think he'd probably want to wisely choose the best scenario for him to win a Super Bowl, which in today's current NFL, what's the best way to win a Super Bowl?
Get the quarterback first.
To have the quarterback, period. And I think he looked at all the potential teams who needed a head coach, who potentially reached out to him, and he saw one team that had that quarterback, and they were called the Los Angeles Chargers. Okay? It's really that easy for me. And I think he's just trying to make a wise decision. I saw somebody say, like, oh, he's big on loyalty. That could have potentially been big for the Raiders because he used to coach for the Raiders. And in a way, the Raiders gave him the first opportunity in the NFL, as a quarterback's coach with Rich Gannon and such, like 2002.
But he did play for the Chargers, though. He was a player for the Chargers.
I mean as a coach, yes, correct. And that goes hand in hand with loyalty, right? It's like, oh man, full circle,
Yep.
But also he could have had that too with the Raiders in a way. So it was like the two obvious candidates for me, at least, was like Raiders or Chargers. But the Raiders had the situation with AP and like the locker room being behind him. And I think for me, if I'm putting myself in Mark Davis's shoes for a moment here, it's like, hindsight 2020 with this Josh McDaniels going for the big name, the big offensive mind that's won Super Bowls, and he's proven it over the guy that just like won over the team and Rich Bisaccia, and the entire locker room was behind him and telling me like, we need to keep this guy. And then within a year, it's like, yeah, Josh McDaniels is the biggest mistake of my life, Mark Davis.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have kept that guy that won over the locker room, and maybe we wouldn't be without Derek Carr now, and maybe we'd be a better team under Rich Bisaccia. I don't know. Maybe more players would have more what's the term for when I keep wanting to say stamina, but like when you lose the locker room, like you or morale, the morale would be better with Rich Bisaccia over Josh McDaniels. Quickly, Josh McDaniels probably lost the morale for the team. And it was felt by the Lions' loss last season. And then you get AP, and what happens? The morale goes back up, right? And hey, Harbaugh's great for that stuff. Yes. But to my point, if you reach out because you're looking for a head coach and he quickly tells you, nah, not interested, that's it. There is no like, well, hold on now. We'll give you our biggest offer. Like if he's going out of his way to make the best decision for himself because that's all he's ever done in his career, because clearly it works for him, right? If his emphasis is like, I need the quarterback and I need to go win a Super Bowl, and his opinion is like, it's Chargers or bust, because he could have been perfectly fine with staying at Michigan and trying to win another college football championship this year. Perhaps just like that year where he was talking to the Vikings, he had one destination and one destination only in his mind. That year it was Michigan, and then he had somebody to use as leverage. Maybe if the Chargers weren't like offering what he wanted, he could have tried using the Raiders as leverage or something, but he didn't even have to. It was done with the Chargers. So to my point, any Raider fan complaining, any person saying, well, they could have tried harder, like no offense to anybody, because even my dad is like very big on this opinion. I don't want to hear
Still?
it.
Is this
He
a
said it
recent?
today. I just saw him
opinion?
today.
Okay.
I just saw him today because I didn't see him this weekend, so we were talking about the Raiders, and it's like, he was saying in the like, we need to get Harbaugh. Like he's a good coach, he's well proven, all this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. It's just look at what AP just did. You know, like he has the locker room by the balls. Like if you go against that, yeah, Harbaugh can come in and completely, within 2 weeks in the training camp, like the team will be bought in. I believe it for sure. It could have been done easily. But if you let go of AP and then they fail, it's like, what does that do for Max Crosby? Right? And with Harbaugh, do I expect him to fail? No. But like if they went out and did like, just random example, if they did Ben Johnson and then by like week 8, we fucking suck. What do you think Max Crosby's going to think? Right? Like, he'd be sitting there like, bro, here we go again. Are you serious? Like we said who we wanted. It didn't work. I understand like players shouldn't lead the team, but like, dude, they would be livid. Davante Adams would be like, get me out of here, please. Yeah. They felt the morale shift. They like Antonio Pierce. They believe in him. They are bought into him. If it doesn't work out, allow Antonio Pierce to not work out. Allow him to do it to himself, I think, rather than letting Rich Bisaccia go and wondering what the hell could have happened. And simply, if Harbaugh, the best option for the Raiders, tells you not interested, that's it. There is no complaint to be had, in my opinion, as a Raider fan. For any other Raider fans of like, why couldn't we get Harbaugh? Why did we mess up again? They reached out. They tried. They were seeking out all possible options.
Well, all right. Here's the thing. All right. I get what you're saying. Harbaugh was not interested. There shouldn't be much more discussion there. But like, you should always want to get the top target. Like, be salesmen. Do what you have to do to lure him. If they would have offered double than the Chargers, why? What reason would Harbaugh have to say no? And I mean, for all we know, the Raiders did. For all we know, the Raiders did. But as it currently, like, oh yeah, we inquired about Harbaugh. He said no. Like, all right, I get it, man. The players wanted Antonio Pierce. So they were kind of like, there was this whole rally for, hey, AP's my choice, right? I get that. If Antonio Pierce was not on the table, if Antonio Pierce was not in the Raiders' back pocket and the Chargers would have just swooped up Harbaugh and then the Raiders would have had to get somebody else, you're telling me you wouldn't be upset as a fan?
If it depends on if the report is still out there that they reached out to Harbaugh and he said not interested. That's the key for me. I'm assuming because a head coach doesn't get hired day one of the hiring cycle. It takes days. I think the Chargers were the last team to get a coach signed, besides maybe the Titans or somebody. But it took them a while before they got that announcement out there. The Raiders reached out. He said not interested. They did their due diligence. That's the way I feel. So if Antonio Pierce was not an option, they reach out. Vic Tafur tweets, the Raiders reached out to Jim Harbaugh, but he responded with a swift not interested. I'd say, damn, on to the next. Would I be upset?
Some people view it differently because it's like, all right, just simply inquiring, oh, Jim, how would you like to be the Raiders coach? Sorry, not interested. Okay, but what if we did this? What, keep pressing the issue,
perhaps they did.
How can we give you the security and everything that you need for you to want to coach the Raiders? We want the best for our fans. We are a franchise that hasn't been relevant for a long time. We want to get back to the storied days. Me, Mark Davis, I want the team to be like what it was when my dad, was still around, was the owner. How can we get back? What can we do? We want the best. You're the best candidate. I get it. You want to go to the Chargers and play with Justin Herbert. We can do whatever you want. We can get JJ McCarthy. We can get you the support that you need. You tell us, we'll do it. We'll give you a big contract. We'll give you money. We'll take care of you.
Yeah,
sell it. Not just. Hey, how would you like to coach the Raiders? No, okay, thank you. Sorry for bothering you. I'm not saying that's how it went down. There's probably a lot of stuff that went on behind the scenes. For all I know, the Raiders did do their due diligence, but it's simply just they're not interested. It's well, damn. All right, what if you're in the draft, right? And then they pull an Eli Manning or was it Drew Brees or no, it was Eli Manning who said he wasn't going to play for the Chargers. He was only going to play for the Giants, right? Or he just said that he wasn't going to play for the Chargers, right? Correct. If every single player and coach ever, coming up, all the good ones just say, I don't want to be with the Raiders. Well, damn, are you just going to accept that as a fan? Well, damn, do better, recruit better, make this a more enticing destination. Do what you have to do to get this team back on track. And I'm not saying the Raiders are going down the wrong path with Antonio Pierce. It's week one. We're having a discussion as if the Raiders have just completely botched this entire thing. We're speaking in absolutes, and I think it's great. It's really great back and forth right now of philosophy of the NFL as a business, and what you have to do in order to recruit and to be competitive. And I can still did the Raiders do the right thing in inquiring? Yes. Could they have tried harder? Yes. Both things can be true.
I'm not sure.
Well, I think both things can be true. I'm not saying should they have tried harder? Should they have tried harder? I don't know. We'll see. That's one of those things. We'll see. Perhaps Antonio Pierce 3 years from now might be hoisting a Lombardi trophy, and Jim Harbaugh may never win one. But, if it was my team and he was out there, like, all right, I would just be like, Jed, why doesn't he want to come here? What is so unappealing about this place? What can we do to fix that? We want you. They say you're the best. We think you're the best. Let's get you here. What do we have to do?
Yeah, the reporting was that they reached out and he was not interested. And there was no additional reporting of whether or not they tried harder and harder. I don't think that I think Jim Harbaugh is a special case where it did not matter to him. I think that his eyes were set, and this is all I think in the same breath of you saying or anybody else saying, why didn't they try harder? Is just as like wishful thinking. We don't really know for sure if that's true or not, or capable of happening, as me saying, I think his sights were set. Like, I can admit, like, me believing that his sights were set on the Chargers day one, and that was the only option for him other than Michigan, can entirely be not true. And maybe he would have been intrigued by the Cowboys if they fired Mike McCarthy. He would have been intrigued by the Titans or whoever if they became available, or what if they had sought him out. But the reporting is the Raiders reached out, inquired about him, and he said not interested. I don't know. I don't know the process of hiring head coaches. I don't know the process of reaching out to head coaches. I don't know if you can get on your knees and beg a coach, but I fucking doubt it. If you're told not interested, not happening, I would probably just move on to the next candidate. Like, what's the point of like having my heart set on this candidate and wasting my time when I can go reach out to other candidates? If he's telling me, nope, not happening, sorry, fine. Thank you for giving us a very quick answer and not wasting our time. Mm-hmm. I understand you could try to sell your franchise, but if if you're considering two different ice cream stores and one ice cream store is full of mold, whereas the other one has like the perfect vanilla ice cream or whatever ice cream you're looking for, you're probably going to go to the one with the vanilla ice cream, that vanilla ice cream being the fucking quarterback. It's that simple to me. So my whole point to this was just, there are Raider fans who are saying, why couldn't we get Harbaugh? There's reporting out there that tells you why we couldn't get Harbaugh. It's because he didn't want to come here. And I think, in my opinion, he wanted to go to a place with the quarterback already set in stone. And he could very quickly, with Greg Roman, build up a rushing offense that can support that quarterback. And the defense is fine with their two defensive ends, and Derwin James and Asante Samuel Jr. They had it pretty well set up. Like, on paper, it's a great team that Tom Telesco built. But they just need a little bit of changes to put his identity sprinkled onto it, and they could start winning games.
No, I agree. It's not set in stone that today the Raiders made the wrong decision in not pursuing Harbaugh harder, which we don't even know how hard they pursued them. Right. I'm willing to admit that. It's barely week one, and for all we know, Antonio Pierce is everything that the players think. Like, perhaps if the Raiders hire Harbaugh, maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe, like we'll never know. We will never know. But for all we know, that wouldn't have worked out. I think that was the choice, or the direction, in my opinion, the direction that should have been best for the organization, but it seems like that was not possible because Jim Harbaugh was not willing, right? So do I think they made the wrong decision? It's too early to tell. Do I think there is a chance? If it was a simple no, could the Raiders have done more in order to entice him more? Yes. So, like, you brought up the whole ice cream example, one store with mold and the other store with, like just vanilla ice cream that's hella good that you want. If you and I are standing right outside and I'm very rich, right? And I'm the owner of the place with mold, And it's like, yeah, the owner of the place that doesn't have mold, they're willing to give you $10 million to go eat their ice cream over there, right? And to be captain of that ice cream parlor, to be the manager there, right? $10 million. But over here in the moldy place, hey, let's fix this mold, and we'll give you $20 million. We'll give you double what they're doing. Which ice cream store are you walking into, Mike?
I understand your point, and if I'm in my life predicament, if I'm offered 20 million instead of 10 million, I'm probably taking 20 million. But I think Harbaugh's in a different lifestyle than me, where he can just choose what's best for him for his legacy, right? And if he views that Justin Herbert is the best opportunity for his legacy, that makes sense to me, man. I don't even blame him, I just think man, I really had something there.
Well, no, this is exactly to your point. Like Anthony says, it's simple. Justin Herbert. Both teams could have offered the same. Hell, the Raiders could have even offered more, but Herbert really tips the scale. I get that,
Yeah.
And I think Harbaugh, in my opinion, is more worried about his legacy than the financials.
Yes.
And
I would just say to even add to that, what I had and I lost for a moment there is Mark Davis has proven in 2 of his most recent hires, not named Antonio Pierce, that he is willing to open the checkbook and say, what the fuck do you want? He's done it twice. And I think, honestly, as far as the Raiders go, this is very situational for Mark Davis. He's struck out twice with these gigantic candidates, overpaying the shit out of them. Oh, the offensive mastermind that's done it before. He's done it twice. So if he does it a third time and strikes out with Harbaugh, it's like, you look like, you already does, but you look like the dude just sitting there with the biggest dunce cap possible. You fucking idiot. So it's like, why not for once just do what you're supposed to do? And granted, I think he did. He did what he's supposed to do in the sense that he still reached out to the big money guy. But he apparently, according to Vic Tafur, and hey, for all we know, maybe Vic Tafur was doing Mark Davis a solid. And Mark Davis said, hey, can you just report for me that, Harbaugh wasn't interested, but he kind of actually was, but we're just going to go with who the players want. It's possible, dude. It is. But the reporting says that Harbaugh told him, no thanks, or whoever, no thanks, not interested. And I personally believe it. So, but again, if Mark Davis wanted Harbaugh that bad, I'm sure he could have sought him out as hard as he fucking wanted.
Yeah. No. Those are good points. The dunce cap has me rolling, dude. Just the image. But let's get through these comments real quick because they're stacking up, and we want to get to our Ravens preview, which shouldn't take long. But Joel says, I was at the game. Salute, Joel. One of the most loyal viewers that we've had over the past year. Joel, thank you for tuning in once again. I hope that you had a good experience at the game besides the outcome, and I hope that you were not one of the people who were fighting. So we didn't even talk about the fight.
Oh, yeah. I mean, really quickly, like, it seemed like Josh Palmer was kind of punking Marcus Epps. Maybe words are exchanged. I have no idea. It just seemed like, because it was a 2-point attempt, I want to say. When they had 22, they were trying to get up 24 to whatever, 10. And, yeah, that makes sense because then they'd be up two touchdowns. And they didn't get it. The Raiders D-line stuffed, I think, the rush attempt. But Josh Palmer just didn't stop blocking Epps. He blocked him, like, out of the back of the end zone. And I think Epps kind of made one, like, push attempt towards, like, maybe his shoulder or face mask. And then Palmer went at his face mask. And before you know it, Jack Jones is there. Nate Hobbs is there. Jack Jones, I think, was pretty quick to throwing punches. And between Palmer and then Quentin Johnson, I think more punches were thrown. And then from what I remember, somebody, I think it was Josh Palmer, was on Hobbs, and some offensive lineman or somebody came and, threw Hobbs off of him, and Hobbs was pretty hot, but he didn't throw any punches. Again, Jack Jones was throwing punches. Palmer was throwing punches. That's why they got thrown out. And then Quentin Johnson kept going. Like, he kept pushing people and shit. Max Crosby gets in there. There's like a bunch of like Chargers players surrounding Crosby and Quentin Johnson. And at the same time, one of the offensive linemen, or no, the tight end, I think, came in and tried to pull Wilkins out, and Wilkins just punks his ass, and like he's like holding him and pushing him back and like pretty much pancakes him, throws him down, does like a somersault over him, turns around, gets up, the tight end gets up and like looks at him, and Wilkins standing there like this, like squared up, like what? But kind of messing around, you know, like Wilkins is. When I saw that, I cracked up, but Quentin Johnson was, you know, poking at Max Crosby's face mask, and I just couldn't help but think that that was probably the most action Quentin Johnson's going to get this year. You know, but
yeah, poor Quentin Johnston. His mom's going to have to work.
Yeah, no.
And no, I mean, he looked better. He looked better yesterday than he has his entire rookie year. So, you know,
he
shout out to him for improving. But yeah, no, he could have hauled in one or two more than he actually did. But Proper 49er says week 1 somebody has to lose. And no, I mean that's correct. I don't know at what point that you tuned in, and thank you for tuning into the channel. As you can see, we talk about 49er topics, we talk about Raider topics, and you know, it's always a great time. All fans are welcome. I obviously specialize in the Niners. Mike specializes in the Raiders. But yeah, no, we just like to have great discussions. But yeah, I said a couple times, it's just week 1, and we got into this big Harbaugh rabbit hole, you know, and like, you know, I think it's still very possible. Mark Davis just decided to pass on Jim Harbaugh, and maybe he made the right choice. That being said, I'm a big Harbaugh believer, but maybe Mark Davis doesn't think that it was worth it, considering the players already wanted Antonio Pierce.
Yeah.
And maybe it wouldn't have worked out.
Again,
he's just not interested.
Yeah, and I think to finalize my thoughts on it, there's a lot of maybes in this, while there is a report out there from Vic Tafur that says, yeah, he was not interested. And that's the most I can take from the whole Raiders and Jim Harbaugh scenario, is just, well, we didn't get him, and there's a report that he wasn't interested, and that's I have to take that as fact. So, you know.
Well, you hear a lot of people talk about it, because I think a lot of people, including myself and your dad, believe that more could have been done to try and sway him in the Raiders' direction. And I think personally, I know you as a friend, you know, we're very good friends. I think you're at the point now where, why the fuck are we still talking about this? Because it didn't happen. And like, you know, this is yesterday's news. Let it go. I don't want to hear about it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Jose, actually, the next comment. Oh no, actually not that one. Probably earlier. Yeah, he said the one where he said, "Would all this talk at 11:08 p.m."
Yeah.
This is
yeah. Would all this talk about a coach be happening if the Raiders would have won? Which I think I texted her. Yeah. Mr. C's been sending me a couple exclusive comments through text.
Yeah. And I probably not. Like, I think hearing it from my dad and kind of expecting a lot of Harbaugh talk, again, because you have talked about it before, I think on this podcast, I just was like, I got to get something off my chest here, because I think at the end of the day, really what this is just unfortunate for Antonio Pierce, because whether it's Raider fans or just NFL fans in general, but probably mostly Raider fans, are going to be comparing Harbaugh to Antonio Pierce. And it's like, okay, Harbaugh has the quarterback, and hey, he has a great track record of turning things around and relatively quickly, right? So it's like, if Harbaugh does the thing that he always does, and he turns it around and he leads the Chargers to the playoffs and yada, 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 all these people are going to be saying, wow, look at what the Raiders missed out on. And my frustration is not only like, well, that's kind of unfair for our current coach, but mostly there is reporting out there that he wasn't interested. So it's not, wow, the Raiders really fucked that up. It's like, if he wasn't interested, shut up. That's my opinion.
Mhm.
But
So I just really quickly wanna ask you this, and I know we use really quickly way more often than we should on this podcast because nothing is quick on this pod. But like, let's just say a couple years from now, Antonio Pierce didn't work out for the Raiders. They move on from him, and the Raiders are on another coaching search. And Jim Harbaugh has led the Chargers to be a perennial playoff team that goes deep into the playoffs. Yes or no? Would you have at least wanted the Raiders to try and do a little bit more to have enticed him to be more interested to go to the Raiders when he was available?
if the reporting is true that he wasn't interested, I don't give a shit.
But what
Because-
does it hurt you? That this is the Raiders' job. The Raiders' job is to assemble the best Raiders. Would you have wanted them to do a little bit more?
I think like we're stuck on could they have done more, and it's like I don't know if they could have done more. That's kind of my issue. Is like if you could prove to me if there could be if honestly the thing I was going
If
to
a
say
report
like
if a report comes out in the future that the Raiders look back on that situation and regret not doing a little bit more.
right,
know?
I was going to say
And
if-
this is what ifs. This is what ifs. So
Yes.
like
Yes.
you know what they say about what ifs, right?
Yes. Like 5 minutes into this conversation, I almost said, I wish we could ask Vic Tafer. Because if Vic Tafer could come out and tweet in a year or two, if, say, Antonio Pierce is fired and Harbaugh led the Chargers to the playoffs, and, like, let's say they win a playoff game against whoever, and it's like, wow, man, and he just reports, like, yeah, the Raiders just didn't do enough to try to get Harbaugh. Like, they could have done more, but they just decided not to, and they went with Pierce. Then yeah, I'd be sitting there going, wow, that's really a fucking bummer to hear, But the reporting is that he was not interested in the Raiders. And until that is proven otherwise, I just don't want to hear it.
Mhm.
And I really think that the comparisons are a little unfair to Antonio Pierce. Not that I'm dick riding Antonio Pierce or really have it out that like I really think Antonio Pierce is better. No. In fact, if I had to predict it right now, he probably won't last his entire 2 years, or even if he does last his 2 years, he probably gets let go. If I had to predict right now what happens with Antonio Pierce, I think the writing's on the wall. Unless they get the quarterback this next offseason, he's not for the long run, right?
But like, all right, my thing too is what is it that is not interesting? Like what is there to not be interested if they can promise you like more job security, more involvement with the team, more money. The Raiders own their own stadium. They don't have to share a facility. Like, is it all right? Is it just the quarterback? Because you can get another quarterback.
Right. I mean, there was a lot of talk in the offseason about there were these rumors and stuff that like, oh, Telesco was brought in specifically in part because he could get us the quarterback. And, I'm not going to sit here and say like, I'm super mad that he didn't, but just if that's true, like he was selling them on like, yeah, I can get you your quarterback. Like I could trade up and get him or whatever. Like that clearly didn't work out. Right. I just, if you're comparing the Raiders and the Chargers, like, okay, the Raiders have a lot to sell themselves on. They're a great franchise. He's been here before. And yes, Vegas, they're all alone. They're in their own market. There's plenty of great places to live in Vegas and Henderson or wherever. And you, Jim Harbaugh, can be the guy that brings them back to the greatness of the past and all this shit, right? Whereas the Chargers, it's like, what's in their past? No offense, guys. Just a couple of Super Bowl losses, one Super Bowl loss to the team, over here. You know,
Yeah.
Dan Fouts. Phillip Rivers. That's it, right?
LT
Latainian Tomlinson. There you go. There's your history.
Junior.
So, Junior, great, yeah.
Jim Harbaugh.
Now, yes. I just think the Raiders had plenty to sell themselves on. I think, it's just a lot of what ifs, and I'm not an Antonio Pierce truther here. I think really this game brought me quite down, not necessarily on him, but just this season. And I just expected the Antonio Pierce versus Harbaugh talk, and I kind of brought it on myself here. I really did. But I just had to get it off my chest of the reason why I don't even want to hear it. Even though I said it, I don't want to hear it from anybody, because it's if he wasn't interested, why do we have to keep saying man, the Raiders really fucked up, or wow, why didn't they go for him? They did. He wasn't interested, so they didn't fuck up. That's it. It's I don't know.
Mm-hmm. One thing I will say though is I'm really glad that you brought it up, because I know it probably added an hour, maybe an hour and a half to our pod tonight. But man, this might be the best single-handed discussion that we've had on the podcast so far, and it won't be the best forever. Next week we're gonna have an even better one, so tune in for episode 51. But yeah, no, I've enjoyed having this conversation, because it's we don't know the right answer yet, and we won't know for some time, and there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that we don't know. We don't know what the conversation was like when they reached out to Harbaugh. Was it just, no thanks? And then they couldn't get a hold of him ever? Or, was it all right, Jim said no. The players have spoken. They want this guy. We're just going to go with this guy. I'm Mark Davis. I've already made the mistake to break the bank for two coaches who I'm still paying. I'm not going to do the same thing with a third guy. And especially too, I didn't even think about this, but and I don't think it's a factor, but at the time people were talking about the investigation with Jim Harbaugh, with the whole college cheating, whatever. I don't know what has resulted of that, but I do remember at the time that was a conversation being had. And you even mentioned on this podcast, with the Raiders' luck, Harbaugh would be hired and something would come up and he would no longer be the coach. So the whole John Gruden experience again, except maybe minus the racism, maybe add the racism. I don't know. You never know what pops up. So I don't know. And I just want to be clear. I don't think Jim Harbaugh is racist. But Lecky said, dumbest thing I've seen as a fan is McDaniels told Ziegler to pass on CJ Stroud for Jimmy Glass. Kill my soul. I mean,
yeah,
kind of. I mean, all right. If we want to stick with the Harbaugh theming, let's say the analogy is that Jimmy Glass is Antonio Pierce. And like I said, week 1, Antonio Pierce has just coached his 10th game in the NFL. Antonio Pierce could be great. I personally don't think he's the worst coach in the division right now, which is crazy, because Sean Payton has won a Super Bowl. But right now, who would I rather, be the coach of my team? I might rather take my chance with Antonio Pierce than whatever the hell Sean Payton is doing over there in Denver. That looks like, I don't know what the plan is over there. And maybe Sean Payton was just carried by Drew Brees. I don't know. But let's just say Jimmy G in this scenario is Antonio Pierce, and CJ Stroud is Jim Harbaugh, And McDaniels and Ziegler or Mark Davis in the front office. Passing on somebody who might be expensive, because in order for the Raiders to have gotten CJ Stroud, they would have had to trade up, which was possible in that draft. The Panthers traded up. The Panthers traded up to the Bears' position, and they drafted the wrong quarterback. They got Bryce Young over CJ Stroud. I think we can definitively say that right now. Barring a miracle for the Panthers, I think they made a horrible trade. But the Raiders did have that option, and they chose Jimmy G. The price tag was very expensive for CJ Stroud, but you could say that would have been worth it. And that's where I think, just to sort of keep the theme of the analogy, the Raiders could have tried a little bit harder, but I don't know if they did. If they didn't try harder, if they didn't make a big, massive effort, then they should have tried harder to get Jim Harbaugh. But they didn't, and we still have yet to find out if that's the right choice. And that is the circle that we've been sort of, going on over the past hour. But yeah.
Yeah, I just think, like many things in this world, this was very situational.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very easy to say and complain that the Raiders, should have gone after Harbaugh. They should have tried harder for Harbaugh, when in reality, in the situational sense, it could be that Mark Davis was trying to learn from his past lessons, and or simply Harbaugh was not interested.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He couldn't be sold. Potentially.
Let me rapid fire some of these comments. Let's see. I already got to Anthony. Anthony, thank you again for checking out the channel and subscribing. I hope that you're still watching. M. Patel says, last place Raiders, draft better, and the difference between a great coach and everyone else. We've already kind of touched on that a lot, with this Raiders versus Chargers recap. I do want to say thank you for checking out the channel and sharing your thoughts. But, we kind of feel like maybe the difference in the Charger game wasn't necessarily the coaching. I just think that the Raiders, where the most important pieces on a football team are the offensive line and the quarterback. I think the Chargers just had a better one. I predicted them to win. Just want to say for the record again. And they won. Let me get to another comment. Proper 49er says, Carr was a champion. Raiders got him hurt. Mike, what do you think about that one?
I have a deep care and appreciation for Derek Carr. And I think he was, again, situational being a key word, right? I think his situation that he had his entire Raiders career was unfortunate. Between coaching changes, offensive scheme changes, and a consistently bottom-of-the-barrel, goddamned horrible defense that he had to rely on, or really the defense was relying on him to not lose game. It was not a good setup for him. And then when he finally is let go with the intent of we're going to find our next quarterback of the future, man, then their defense gets good because they bring in Patrick Graham and they build around Max Crosby, and the scheme, when you actually give the scheme a couple of years, it finally starts to mold into something that can work. Whereas in the past, it was every 2 years, it was oh, this guy's a bum. Get him out of here. And then you have to restart. Oh, suddenly this player doesn't fit our scheme anymore. Restart. Got to draft rookies. You know how long it takes rookies to start playing good on defense? It's not just every player is just good day one. No. Nate Hobbs, very rare. Trevon Merrick, It's taken him years to play at like a good level. So I just to the point, I think Carr could win playoff games. I can't say for a fact that he would win a Super Bowl because he probably won't, unfortunately for him. But I think that if Derek Carr were the quarterback today, depending on who the offensive play caller is, I would fully believe that he would win a playoff game for the Raiders, at least one. So, situation.
Let's see. Proper 49er also said get Pro Bowler scouting. Sky Nell says Harbor and Harbor. I wonder. I mean, was I like slurring Jim Harbaugh's name, and that's just what the conversation was. If you're still here, please elaborate. Maybe I was like, oh, Jim Harbaugh, and I mean, we did talk a lot about Jim Harbaugh, and honestly, I think we talked about this months ago, Mike, where it was like when the schedule first came out. I was like, man, I'm glad they're playing week 1 because we're going to be able to see Antonio Pierce versus Jim Harbaugh, because that was the big discussion coaching wise. And it's going to be the discussion for years to come, I think. Whether you like it or not, be prepared. Be prepared to be annoyed because it's going to be a discussion when maybe it shouldn't be, but it is.
Yeah, I think really, to Jose's point, winning cures everything. And I think if we had beaten the Chargers, I probably wouldn't feel the necessity to bring it up. It's just I heard it a little too many times where I was like, all right, I'm expecting to hear it from Josh. So let's just get it out of the way. And it wasn't even you that brought it. It was me, but I just think Raider fans, if you follow the reporting, it really shouldn't be like, why didn't we do it? It's like, just stop. And Charger fans, for gloating, hey, you guys won. Winning fixes everything. And if the Chargers win a Super Bowl in 2 or 3 years, it's like, yeah, hey, clearly you guys made the right decision. That doesn't mean that the Raiders made the wrong decision if he wasn't interested. So,
yeah.
But that's what's going to be said. That's what's going to be said. As long as it's like Antonio Pierce versus Harbaugh, and Antonio Pierce is still the head coach of the Raiders, and the Raiders still fucking suck, it's going to be, man, they really made the wrong decision. When it's like, according to what I've seen of the very small amount of reporting on the Harbaugh and Raiders front, there was no decision to be made. Mm-hmm. Harbaugh made the decision, apparently.
So. Yeah, I mean, we've talked in circles about this a lot.
And I'll end it with this. I'll end it with this. Here's what I hope for. I hope that what in 5, 10, 20 years from now, what we are saying, it'll probably be less than 20 years. I hope that in 5 to 10 years from now, hey, hopefully less. I hope in 2 years from now, the tone is flipped on its head, and what everybody is saying is, man, did Jim Harbaugh make the wrong decision?
Okay. We'll talk about that on the pod in 20 years on ESPN.
Again, hopefully 2 years, but it's probably going to take the Raiders longer than that. But again, winning cures everything. So if he can't win the Super Bowl and the Raiders win one before the Chargers do, there you go, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see.
Pia's dad says, Mr. C says, you hit it right on the money, Mike. This was at 11:22, so I want to say I saw this comment come in around the time that you brought up the dunce cap and like making the same mistake over and over. So maybe like the whole making mistake thing, but I like to think it's the whole dunce cap thing, just because that would be funny.
I think it just comes down to reporting, and I again, situational. So
Papa J brings up a very interesting question. He says, it shouldn't be about the past. It should be about the future, though, right? And I think that was the thing about the hire between Jim Harbaugh and Antonio Pierce is Antonio Pierce was showing promise and the players wanted to play with him for future reference, but Jim Harbaugh has the past to back up, that he is a good coaching candidate.
Yeah, and what Papa J could also be saying is, hey, in this past season, Tony Pierce was able to get it done, but in theory, in the future, Jim Harbaugh will get it done more consistently. I could see that being his point too.
Yep.
I would just say either way, Antonio Pierce was able to do something to the Chiefs that the Raiders hadn't done in a long time, at least maybe ever in the Andy Reid era. Of they were able to just out physical the shit out of them and just beat them.
No, dude, the Raiders have done it. You don't remember the bus ride around the stadium, John Gruden?
Yeah, yes, they did it that time, and it was in their house. So that would be the one other time. It's just difficult with Gruden.
They've done it.
I don't think that they out physicaled them in that one though. They just outscored them. Whereas this one, it was like they beat them down. And with Gruden, it was like he had 3 or so years, and with time, he was kind of, to me, losing it. Of like, for me, he was definitely losing the fans. I'm curious what the locker room was like with Gruden, but that final year, he was getting worse and worse. And the team was not getting anywhere. Whereas with Pierce, it was like he rejuvenated something, right? And I think that there's something there, but I'm not going to promise that Antonio Pierce is going to win a bunch of fucking games or something. Just, I'm curious what Papa J meant here.
Yeah. No, Papa J, if you're still watching, elaborate. Is it what Mike said or is it what I said? Because Mike convinced me it's what Mike said.
And I could see it being in regards to Mark Davis's decision-making of like, well, I struck out twice with the big pay hires. Let me go with the cheaper hire who won over the locker room. Maybe in Papa J's mind, it's like, well, if it's about the future, maybe Jim Harbaugh would have been best for the future. Maybe that's what he's saying. But again, to me, it's like, well, the reporting says what it says.
There was one other thing that I was going to say, but I forgot. So we'll just keep moving on the comments. Could have, should have, would have. I will try to find when Harbaugh was asked about the Raiders. I do remember him saying nothing about not being interested.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to assume from the moment when he was hired with the Chargers and probably got his first press conference, not saying that Jose is saying anything wrong here, just I don't know if anybody would have asked him something along the lines of like, well, were you interested in any other teams? Like I if anything, he's probably victory lapping and he's at his press conference saying, I wanted to be a Charger so bad. I'm so happy that this happened. I'm fired up. Because we all know Harbaugh, right? Like, I'm sure that's what he was saying. I wish that there was more reporting, genuinely. I wish that there was. The only reporting, actually, I think I sent it to the Silver and Gold Twitter. If you want to just pull it up really quick. And then maybe we could get off of this. But Vic Tafur said that the Raiders talked to his agent.
Okay, let me pull it up.
So it's not entirely that he said not interested, but like, again, this is what I said on the last pod. Like, Vic Tafur withholds information. Why can't he just elaborate a little bit more, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, to the point of the initial tweet from Las Vegas Raiders 365, Harbaugh, Belichick, Vrabel on the market. They didn't talk to a single one of them. Vic Tafur says, well, they talked to Harbaugh's agent. So I'm admittedly a little bit of a speculation or assumption here because Vic Tafur doesn't give us much here. But if the Raiders talked to Harbaugh's agent, agents, I don't think, seek out NFL teams. I would assume teams seek out, the coaching candidate. So the Raiders sought out Harbaugh. They talked, but there was no additional reporting on they met, they talked, nothing, which tells me, and again, you can call this an assumption, he was not interested because the Raiders sought him out and there was nothing else.
Mm-hmm. one thing I will say is both definitely happen. Both definitely do happen. Where I guess it depends how sought out after you are. In terms of who reaches out to who between the agent and the team. Like I feel like
And I
it just
wish Vic
depends on the
was even more.
situation.
I wish Vic was just a little bit more specific of like instead of they talked to, I wish he could have said they sought out or they reached out to. That's all he had to do to confirm what I'm saying here. But like Vic Tafer is so like I'm not gonna drop the ball here or like do somebody wrong. I don't know,
maybe
man.
he can't. Maybe it's off the record and he just can't.
Right,
You
but
know, like
it's
it's like I can confirm they talked to his agent, but those like what actually went on behind closed doors, I have to keep to myself.
yeah. I guess my thing is just like if the writing is on the wall that he's going to go to your division rival, why wouldn't you try to sway him away? You know? So if they talk to him and the writing's on the wall that he's probably leaning Chargers, I would have to assume that they tried to sway him away. If they're like worried and they know that he's a fucking great coach, oh my god, oh no, not another one in our division, right?
Mhm.
Like if I were them, yes, I would have tried to talk to him and really get serious, and I would have been between the two for sure. Those would have been my final two candidates. But
Mhm.
if they talk to him and that's the only reporting there was never any in-person meetings, nothing. That sure as shit tells me that somebody was not interested. And I would assume, based off of previous coaching cycles, the team reaches out to the coaching candidate. The team has requested an interview with Mike Vrabel. The team has requested an interview with Bill Belichick. That's what it always is. So if they talked to him, but they never interviewed him, what does that tell you? I'm done.
Mhm. Yeah, we can go all day. We practically have gone all night. But proper 49er says all receivers should have a jugs machine. A lot of drop balls.
Right for the Niner game, Ayuk.
Yeah, I mean, probably also like you mentioned, Quentin Johnston also dropped a couple balls as well. So
Yeah, but that's Quentin Johnson.
I know Jordan Mason. It was reported that he this offseason bought a jugs machine and spent like $3,000 on it. But
I did see that.
some of these players just aren't as passionate about the game. Like this is just a job to them,
Mhm.
So like think about in your job right now, like let's just say you work in an office and maybe it would be better for you to take certain classes for you to learn certain things and you would be more efficient at your job. Like, some like just think about it. Like it's a business and it's a job for some of these players. And a lot of them do take it seriously. It was more we'll get to that bridge when we were crossing it. I'm not exactly sure what exactly that's referencing from Mr. C, but Harbaugh would have been another Jimmy G, maybe connecting to that the scenario that I laid out. The with Lecky's comment where I was like, I said Antonio Pierce would be Jimmy G and Harbaugh would be CJ Stroud. Maybe it's the opposite, is what proper 49er I think is trying to say. Ex-Niner punching bag.
Probably Harbaugh.
Maybe, from the front office, they definitely chewed him apart before they got out. He left the NFL for years after that.
Yeah. Perhaps Prophet or Proper Niner. I didn't catch it. Is not a big fan of Harbaugh from his time as a Niner fan and Harbaugh's time as a head coach with the Niners.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, and if we're wrong about that, proper Niner, just feel free to clarify. We get things wrong sometimes. The players wanted the coach and got him. Probably Antonio Pierce is what Mr. C is bringing up. Papa J says, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. that can be true for a lot of things, but relationships is not one of them. Let's see. Proper 49er. Jimmy G had no long ball. He was a dink and dunk pro. You got a wide receiver that he couldn't ever reach. Devontae was on Saturn. Yeah, I'm really glad that you're checking out this podcast, because I said it, like, one of our first streams was like, I thought maybe Jimmy G could help change the culture, but I didn't think that his skill set was going to pair up with Devontae Adams. And, there were people that thought it could work, but I mean, as 49er fans, we have seen Jimmy Garoppolo in action. So, Proper 49er says no O-line, and says, I like the Antonio Pierce aura, time to act bold. I do like Antonio Pierce's vibe, like, that's why right now, if I had to pick one to coach my team, I would almost rather take Antonio Pierce over Sean Payton, because I don't know. I never liked Sean Payton. Like, Sean Payton probably is the better coach, but Antonio Pierce kind of, I think just gets me more hyped as a fan.
Right. Yeah, I think to this point here also, to like time to act bold, like I think that was another issue people had with not going for it on 4th and 1. And this is way back in our conversation, but like he acts like this, like we got to be physical, we got to beat the shit out of them, and then it's like you can't do that, say that, and then be conservative. I can feel that. I understand that point. It's just, if you lose the game because you go for it on 4th and 1, then man, you know what? I guess some people can appreciate, like, say the Lions or those teams that like go for on 4th down all the time, like living and dying by that. Like, if the Raiders wanted to be one of those teams, I think a lot of fans would be okay with it. But there comes a point where if it doesn't work again and again and again and again and again, it's like, what a fucking idiot for continuing to try this, So I don't know. I think I do agree with the Antonio Pierce aura, though. His presence alone almost sets the tone for the team, and it just sucks that they're in the predicament that they are with the quarterback. So,
let's see here. Proper 49er says CMC was a what if trade, and many said that the deal was the worst. Yeah, no, I have heard that, and then I think there were like professional grades saying that the trade was not good, and I personally liked the trade at the time, but one thing I will say is the 49ers are still yet to win a Super Bowl since they made the trade. Do I feel like they've won that trade? Absolutely. They got McCaffrey for a steal. One thing though is it's funny that you're mentioning that tonight, because McCaffrey didn't play and the 49ers put up 32 points on a good Jets defense with Jordan Mason. So, the thing about running backs is, McCaffrey, I think, is by far the highest paid running back in the NFL. And, me personally, I would rather put that money towards the offensive line, but that's me. I'm not a professional head coach. I'm not Kyle Shanahan. And Shanahan has his team, blowing out teams every single year, practically. So, the Niners won that deal, but they still have to win the Super Bowl. But yeah, they won the trade, and I love McCaffrey. Mr. C says, I was agreeing with Mike when he said that as a fan, he was satisfied as soon as he read that Harbaugh was not interested.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And putting the tweet up earlier, maybe 10 minutes ago, it kind of shows that he didn't exactly, like, it wasn't exactly reported that he was not interested. It's just, to me, when I read into it and I look at the writing on the wall, it tells me, and I'm very confident in this opinion or assumption, that he was not interested. And for that, I personally am satisfied. But I think because probably most Raider fans did not see that tweet, that very vague tweet from Vic Tafur, and literally that being the only reporting on Jim Harbaugh and the Raiders talking, I understand why most Raider fans are like, why didn't we go after him? That's why I guess I kind of said it quickly and kind of we just went over it, but like I just wish there was better reporting on this. Why couldn't have they reported like if anything, why couldn't the Raiders put out some like, you know, I'm sure they do. I'm sure teams do this. I'm sure a lot of things do this in the media of like, hey, can you just like somebody will give out a fake scoop of like, hey, we talked to Harbaugh, but he really was not interested. And put out a fluff piece. Not the Raiders, but give a fake source. I know this is probably stupid for me to say this, but give out a fake source to a Vic Tafur or to Sean Reed or anybody, Vinny Bonsignore or Hondo Carpenter, and tell them, yeah, we talked to Jim Harbaugh. He was not interested. Because then that guy reports it, and the fans don't have to say all this shit. At the end of the day, does it really matter? No. What matters is winning. But if the Chargers go out there and win a bunch, it's just going to make Mark Davis look bad to the fans. Whereas to me, it's like I saw one little tweet, and I was like, I'm clear. But at least 69%, nice, of Raider fans have not seen that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
or part of that 69%, nice. Just kidding. Part of that 69% that you are referencing maybe have seen the tweet, but it's not good enough for them.
Yeah, maybe it's like,
you know,
like
similar to the 49ers. There's fans that are like, yeah, you know, they haven't won the Super Bowl, but they're at least there every year. That's good enough for me. I'd rather be in the mix every year than go through a rebuild and everything. And then there's the other side of 49er fans, which, you know, it's like it's just going is not good enough for me. It's not good enough. We need better. Why can't we win the Super Bowl? You know, and right. I tend to be like kind of one of those kinds of fans, but I do enjoy, like, I will say I enjoy the Shanahan era because it's way better than the Tom Sula era. It's way better than the Chip Kelly era, but it's not as good as the Harbaugh era, in my opinion. Well, all right, there's more wins and the team is more dominant, I'd say, than the Harbaugh era team was.
More dominant and consistent.
But I will say I thoroughly loved Harbaugh more than I love Shanahan. And, you know, I want to see them get it done. And
there was more personality there with Harbaugh.
Yeah. Fossey says, "Sup, boys." Fossey, thank you for tuning back in. Welcome back. And Fossey also shares his thoughts. He says, the Raiders are so far behind the rest of the division now that the Chargers have hired Jim Harbaugh. The whole division is light years ahead of the Las Vegas Raiders. I will say it definitely looks like, coaching-wise, I can 100% see that. Roster-wise, the Broncos, I think, are behind. The Broncos are way behind.
The only thing going for the Broncos is that they, in their opinion, have their quarterback. And that's yet to be seen if they truly do, right? But yes, on paper, the other coaches are far superior in past experience, right?
In accolades, in experience, yes. in you know what they've proven. You know, they're proven. They're proven, and they all have some form of championship pedigree at some sort of. I get. Would you call college like a professional level? Like that's kind of semi-pro. I mean, it's at the college level or above. I'll say.
Right, but still, Harbaugh's done something that like only Nick Saban and a couple other people have done in the past like 20 years. So
yeah,
you know, high pedigree, and he's won. He's gone to the Super Bowl before. All that. Sean Payton's won a Super Bowl before. I get all that. I think Josh, you would probably agree with me because we already kind of said this earlier. But like, if you just put Justin Herbert, if you swapped Justin Herbert with Gardner Minshew, roster to roster, chances are the Raiders win the game yesterday against the Chargers, right?
Yeah,
like I would say
they would have won that game.
Yeah, and I think, and again, I think a lot of this lies on Luke Getsy, and I think he's very important to the success of this current Raiders team. But I just think if they had that quarterback, we would be saying the Raiders are light years ahead of the Broncos and the Chargers. And they are right there. Like, they're not right there with, like, the consistency of the Chiefs, but they are right there pushing on the Chiefs and competing with them. Similar to, say, the Jets with the Bills and the Dolphins or something like that, of like, we expect the Bills and the Dolphins to be winning that division, but the Jets are like, man, they have built something there where they can do it. It's just they haven't yet.
Well, all right. I will say, what have I been adamant about? And this heavily ties into this comment, and this is why I'm bringing it up. What have I been saying is the most important factors to an NFL team?
I think you said the coach and the quarterback.
The two most important are the head coach and the quarterback, and then the third obviously is the offensive line. But the Chiefs absolutely have their head coach and their quarterback. The Chargers absolutely right now have their head coach and their quarterback. They are not switching either of them for any period of time or for the near future. The Broncos, they might have their head coach. Like all right, they obviously have. They had to have had high expectations for Sean Payton, and he has absolutely under delivered on every single one of those expectations so far.
Yeah, I think he's kind of in a situation where he's probably trying to build the team into his image, and he kind of rebuilt it to a degree. So it makes sense why he's like struggling. I just don't have the biggest belief in him, but I think they invested so much into him because they had to trade for him and pay him top dollar, that they definitely have their coach for a while now. I don't know if he's going to win for them, but he has a track record to him. So
yeah.
And then he drafted his guy at quarterback, which he keeps telling all the media is like, oh, I tricked everybody. I got my guy.
Yeah, they have made a decision, and they have a guy with at least a Super Bowl, and they've made their decision on their future quarterback. They went with Bo Nix. That's their guy. That will be their guy until it's not their guy. But at least they have a guy that they're rolling with. The Raiders, on the other hand, their coach reportedly is a 2-year deal, so it's kind of a prove it. They may or may not have their coach, and they absolutely do not have their quarterback.
Yeah, and
so that is where I can see the argument of the Raiders are light years behind, because those are the two most important things to have, and they don't have it. They've got a talented team, but they don't have the two most important factors to an NFL team.
Yeah, and I would even go on top of that of saying like they
might have one of the two, but they absolutely do not have one of the two.
Right. Yeah, good save. Yep. On top of that, them having a competitive roster surrounding the quarterback might actually even put them further down than you would think or like expect. Because in theory,
further away from getting the quarterback.
Right. Get further away from getting what they need, because we keep talking about taking their medicine and all that. They need to just not tank, but lose. They need to be forced into losing so that they can go and get that quarterback in the draft, because you're not going to get him in free agency. Hey, Dak Prescott just got re-signed. We were talking about a week ago. That's out of the fucking window now, right? There's nobody else. So you have to draft a quarterback. And if you're going to be picking at, say, pick 14 overall because you had a near 500 season again, you're not going to get the best quarterback in the draft for a fact. So if they're going to have this competitive roster because, our coach is like, he can push a team with a shitty quarterback to playing good enough to win games in, tight, close games and like out powering and, punching them in the face type games. Awesome. But you're hindering yourself in a way because you're not going to get that quarterback that you need. So, to that point of quarterback, yes.
Yeah. Real quick, Fossey says Raiders not trading for Pennick set them back another 2 to 3 years in the grand scheme of things. Can't be successful in the league without their guy. I will. I'm going to play devil's advocate. If Penix is not a good NFL quarterback, then the Raiders are closer now, not having traded for him, to getting their guy than having traded for him. Obviously, you miss every dart throw you don't make, but if Penix doesn't work out, then this is like a they theoretically set themselves back 2 to 3 years in the grand scheme of things if Penix is good.
Who did
And then
I think it was the Titans that were picking 7th overall.
in this year's draft?
Yeah. I feel like they took an offensive tackle or
Yeah, I forget.
damn. I'll search it up. You continue. I'll make a point in a second.
Proper 49er asks, who is the Raiders quarterback coach?
He used to be a Niners quarterback coach, I think.
Is it Scangarillo? Don't tell me it is.
Yes.
That's the Raiders quarterback coach?
Yeah.
Oh, man, he's awful. He's not good.
Yeah.
Hold on, Raiders QB coach, and then I'll get to Fossey's comment, and then oh my God, it is Rich Scangarillo. I don't know, dude. I'm out on Rich Scangarillo. Oh,
right. So I mean,
that's why that fumble pass happened, Mike.
I don't know, man. I bear in mind, remember the whole debacle of like, oh, the Raiders wanted Cliff Kingsbury, and then they couldn't get him because he ended up going to he bowed out and went to Washington. Like, that was the whole thing that kind of pissed me off. Was like, it seemed like they had their guy, then he bowed out because apparently, I don't even know what the reporting was, and like whether they didn't offer him enough or what, or he just wanted to go to Washington because Dan.
Was that for a quarterback coach or offensive coordinator?
Offensive coordinator, but I'm assuming he would have probably had a big hand in who the offense or the quarterback coach would have been. Plus, he always has a first hand on the quarterbacks. He's a quarterback guy, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the theory was like, all right, he's going to help us develop our quarterback, whoever that guy is, whether we draft him or it's O'Connell or whoever, right? I'm sure once he got a call, just like Harbaugh, it's just obvious. It's like when you look at the situations, it's like when the Commanders come and call and say, hey, we'll give you the offensive coordinator job. You got to be sitting there going, all right, they have the 2nd overall pick. Yeah, they're picking a quarterback. I mean, come on. I'm going to go with that, not Aiden O'Connell. It seems kind of obvious. Just point being, they were kind of late in the process on the offensive coordinator, and hence they were late in the process on getting a quarterback coach. I don't know if they'll keep Scangarello after a year. If he's really that bad, I hope they don't. But whenever they do draft a quarterback, those coaches are going to matter, and that's where my mind takes me to. Maybe Antonio Pierce doesn't last, and you just kind of let him naturally cancel himself out, and it's sort of a long-term taking your medicine of like, if you're smart, Mark Davis, when you draft your quarterback, you want to pair him with a guy who's going to be calling plays, preferably who is also the head coach, because if he's your offensive coordinator, eventually, like say a Ben Johnson, he will become a head coach if he's good. Whereas if he's already your head coach, he's going to be with your quarterback through and through. But if you have this great offensive coordinator and great quarterbacks coach teaching up your QB, if they eventually go and become the head coach of the Browns someday, it's like, damn, we got to get a new coach for our quarterback, and a new new system. Like that's what happened to Derek Carr. You kept changing the system. It completely tanks them, man. It completely fucks them up. 7th overall pick, Tennessee Titans selected offensive tackle J.C. Latham out of Alabama. That is the only team that I think the Raiders could have traded up with to potentially take Michael Penix because he was the following pick. And to my point here, I guess it takes 2 to tango to make a trade. So in theory, like if Michael Penix was their guy, yeah, you probably should trade up. Maybe they really thought, based off the intel that they had and the prospect that he was, that, like the media was saying, oh, he's a 2nd round pick at best. Maybe they really were confident, like, he's going to make it 13, we're going to take him. But if he's really your guy, maybe you should do what you got to do to get him, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I'm fine with Bowers being the pick, best player available. Someday they'll get the quarterback, and hopefully Bowers will be the one of those blue chip diamonds on the team.
Fossey says, got to start from scratch and then develop him over a year or two. In terms of the incoming quarterback. Mike, let's preview the Raiders versus the Ravens. This is going to be our final topic of the day. Well, yeah, I guess day, because we're into tomorrow now. I think we can keep this short and sweet. I think the Ravens are going to win this game. I think that they're very upset that they lost to the Chiefs and feel like they should have won that game. And one factor, which is the only factor that needs to be monitored, is whether or not Lamar Jackson is going to play in this game, because for whatever reason, he didn't practice today. I don't know what that was all about. So apparently, a couple fans are saying maybe it's normal, but I have no reason to believe that Lamar Jackson shouldn't play in this game. But I still think, if Lamar doesn't play, maybe the Raiders could steal this game, but they still would have to stop Derrick Henry, which I think they could do. I think they could stop Derrick Henry.
Yeah, it depends on their rush defense, really. I have a lot to say here. The Raiders are going to lose.
You think so?
Oh, they're going to lose. They're going to start 0-2, and then they get a nice Week 3 matchup against the Panthers.
Fossey says Ravens are going to have a field day against the Raiders. Yeah, they got Tyler Huntley back, right? The Ravens, just in case Lamar misses. If Tyler Huntley's playing quarterback, then I think the Ravens would still probably win.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember, but
Proper 49er says Jackson looked rusty in the game. I thought he looked pretty. You know what? Lamar Jackson to me looked like you could tell he was playing very desperately. And I think when Lamar is playing desperately is not when he's playing his best football.
I think it was, I wouldn't exactly call it desperate. Well, he was definitely desperate to win, but I think he was playing with very high intensity. And I guess you could call it desperate in the sense that he was willing to do anything to win that game. And I think in most games he doesn't run that much and put his body on the line like that. I think he knew all right, the entire nation's watching. The last game I played, I lost to these fuckers. I want to beat them bad,
Mm-hmm.
And I think honestly, the Chiefs' defensive backs were not allowing the Ravens receivers to get open, and it might have been in large part on the Ravens receivers because they couldn't get open past 7 yards. It was terrible. Mm-hmm. So I think he just realized, yeah, this is not working out. I got to run here, because it's the only thing that was working. Because once the Chiefs started scoring, it was we can't really run Derrick Henry every other play anymore. They started taking him out, and then it was just the Lamar Jackson show. So I'd expect a more relaxed Lamar Jackson against the Raiders. Here and there, Max Crosby will be getting in there. Christian Wilkins hopefully will be getting in there, but I think Derrick Henry has a game against the Raiders, probably 17 carries for 120 yards and a touchdown, maybe 2 touchdowns, and I think the Raiders probably turn it over again a couple times, at least once if it's Gardner Minshew, right? And I don't think the Raiders are going to beat themselves this one. I think the Ravens are going to beat the Raiders. But I think it's not going to be fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I don't think it'll be fun for the Raiders, but I mean, to make it fun, it's a winnable game if Lamar doesn't play. That's the only way that I see this as a winnable game for the Raiders. And I'm not even going to pick against the Ravens. I'm just going to pick the Ravens to win. If Lamar doesn't play, maybe I'll text you with an update, sort of based off of vibes or whatever. But I think the Ravens like Fossey said, are going to have a field day. I think they'll win pretty convincingly, and there's a chance that this game could get ugly for the Raiders. Should it be like maybe it'll just be like one of those games where maybe it's a 2-score game, but oh man, the reason why I think it could get ugly is not because the Raiders defense, I really just think it's all about the offense. If the offense can't get going, then they can't sustain drives, then the defense gets tired, and then the Ravens are going to put up points. They're not going to get blown out. It's like it's asking too much. So I am going to go ahead and lock it in right now. Let me share my screen. And then I will take these comments before we ultimately get out of here tonight. I am going to go with the Ravens. I forgot to even mention it was doing that last time. Okay. Mike, who are you picking? The Raiders?
The Ravens.
No.
I see 3. Oh man, I see 4 winnable games after this game. Unfortunately,
Winnable,
as a fan
yeah.
of the Raiders who wants a top 5 pick in the draft, unfortunately, I see 4 very winnable games coming up after this game. So a slow start isn't the end of the world for the Raiders, and I think maybe starting in week 3, Antonio Pierce can start showing why he was hired as the head coach. Because I think also at the end of the season, there is a stretch of games somewhere where it's like, that's got a couple of winnable games in there. But obviously, we will see at the end of the season how it all goes. But until then, we'll take it 1 week at a time. And in a very deep, dark place, I'm going to be hoping that we lose every game. So,
Yeah. Proper 49er says, leaving the pocket shows weakness. Well, I think in Lamar Jackson's case, it's a strength. Him leaving the pocket is one of the things that makes Lamar Jackson. Like he's one of the premier weapons in the NFL. And I think him being able to escape pressure, make people miss tackles, and just extend plays is why. And I think if he was in the pocket primarily, I just don't see the like what's super enticing about him.
Yeah, if he stayed in the pocket, he might be at more risk of getting hurt than when he's able to escape the pocket and run for 7 yards and slide. I think, in Lamar Jackson's case, leaving the pocket is the difference between, a potential gain and a coverage sack. That, or at least in the Chiefs game, from what I saw, that's what it was to me. It was like, if he just stayed in the pocket and tried to wait for a receiver to get open, he was getting sacked because Chris Jones was wrecking shit up. Whereas in this next comment, I think is, in relation to Josh Dobbs, I can see what he means here.
That's why Dobbs isn't quarterback 2, that's why he's not quarterback number 2. I have the feeling that Shanahan had his mind made up because when they first signed Dobbs, do you remember when I put it on the depth chart of the spreadsheet? Like, I remember saying, yeah, no, this is an excellent quarterback 2 to have because if Purdy goes down, Dobbs can come in and win a couple games. But I mean, I don't think very highly of Brandon Allen, and I think Shanahan, wanted to bring in Dobbs and see what he had in there, and he wasn't blown away, so he just kind of like probably he gave the nod to Brandon Allen because he's been here longer than Josh Dobbs. Brandon Allen was on the roster the year before and probably understands the offense a little bit better than Josh Dobbs does. And one thing I will say is Dobbs must have done something right because he is still on the roster. The 49ers got him for practically nothing. He played well in the preseason, and the 49ers chose to keep him over Tanner Mordecai, who, they were able to keep because they didn't show a lot of Tanner Mordecai in the preseason. But yeah, no, they took the gamble on that rather than just, hey, you know what, we'll roll with Brock and Brandon Allen, but Brandon Allen's going to be next in line, and I guess we'll see. So,
Yeah.
uh,
I get proper 49ers point though. Like if there's an opportunity while you're in the pocket, but you just like it's the Justin Fields argument, right? It's
Yep.
like Justin Fields is just prone to running when he has something there. He's just like, I'm just gonna run, and it's like that. Yes, that shows like you are. What was the term he said? That you
weakness,
are a
but
weakness. Yes. Whereas
but
Lamar Jackson, it is purely a strength for him because he
yeah.
can do it all.
Yeah, Fossey says Raiders don't have a starting quarterback or running back one. I disagree with the running back one. I think like maybe Zamir White isn't a fantastic running. Like he's not an upper echelon running back, but he just didn't have anywhere to run. And then later in the game he did. You can only do so much with what the offensive line gives you. But even with a good defense, it's going to be hard to win games with those two positions being a question mark. And also says, hell, head coach is a question mark. It's going to be a long season for the Raiders. I can see that, and honestly, I think Mike expects a long season.
Yeah, I expect a long season, most specifically because of the quarterback, and I think the play caller,
Luke Getsy.
Luke Getsy, has a lot, to
prove
to do with the success of this season. And I don't disagree with his point at running back, and I don't disagree with his point at head coach either. I granted I'm definitely rooting for Antonio Pierce. Like it would be a great story if he just proves it in the long term and they find the perfect, whether it's Getsy or not, the right coordinator to pair with the young quarterback they hopefully draft next year, and it just all magically works out. I hope for it, but I see why a lot of people doubt it, and I don't blame them at all. Inexperience is definitely a thing here. We will see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. And this will be the final comment before we get out of here. But Proper 49ers says Tanner Mordecai is a project to be tucked away. Yeah, I mean, I personally like Mordecai. I was kind of shocked that the 49ers chose to keep the two veteran backups rather than, sort of pull the Brock Purdy card with Tanner Mordecai, because Purdy has played one season where he had a season-ending injury in the NFC Championship game and then had a great season last year. And, I mean, Purdy's still young. I think he's probably going to be the long-term guy, but, the things change very quickly in the NFL. Not saying that it would be for play, but, we had Grant Cohn on last week, and he brought up a great point. Like one of the things, two weeks ago, one of the things that could cause Brock Purdy to not receive that extension. Like, I mean, let's be honest, he's going to get the extension, but if there were a reason for him not to get the extension, it's not going to be play regression because he's better than Jimmy Garoppolo. It's going to be if he cannot stay healthy.
Right.
And so if the 49ers can keep him upright, can keep Brock healthy, if Brock can protect himself, he should be the long-term guy. And Mordecai, hopefully, is just the project to be the quarterback too, long-term. I know that kind of sucks for him to think about in his career, but hey, he went undrafted. So being on an NFL roster or doing something NFL-wise is a blessing.
Yeah, dude, being a QB2 under a coach that trusts you to be the QB2, whenever your contract comes up, like being the QB2 can be a pretty handsomely paid position. So
yeah,
if he can do that, that's good for him, man. He looked good in the Raiders game from what I saw. So hey, if something bad were to happen to the one or two Raider quarterbacks, you never know, man. We might be plugging him.
Oh, from the practice squad, yeah.
Yeah.
Fossey says, cheers, boys. Looking forward to hanging out with you guys this season. Cheers, Fossey. Thank you again for tuning in, sharing your thoughts. that's going to be it for us tonight. Mike and I, we probably just had our best podcast today. And then Proper 49er says subscribe and thumbs up. No, thank you so much for subscribing. Please consider liking the live stream and tuning back in. We will go live. Should be every single week this season. And then, in the off season, we go live when we have stuff to talk about. So
I think we're aiming for Mondays.
Yeah, we're probably going to be aiming for Mondays, maybe starting around the time Monday Night Football starts.
I was going to say, I remember when we watched, I think it was week 1 last year with the Jets versus the Bills, and Rodgers got hurt, but the Jets won on the punt return. We were in here before the game was over that night, and we were talking about, the Raiders and Niners games. I would love to be able to come in here like around halftime or something, and as we're doing the pod, kind of reacting to the game and stuff too, a little bit, but
like a hangout room, you know what I mean? Like it's awesome taking your guys' comments. I know as somebody who watches other content creators, other streams and everything, I love commenting and like sharing my thoughts, and it's cool because when you watch TV, you can't necessarily contribute to the show. But I mean, luckily for us on YouTube, we don't have to worry about that because we are able to contribute, have our own opinions heard. Mike and I have said it time and time again. Your guys' thoughts and everything, they're welcome. We even put comments on the screen of people, who don't necessarily their opinions don't align with us, and all we can say is we can respectfully disagree, give our points as to why we disagree, and then maybe find a common ground from there. We try to be as respectful as possible, but we also try to have fun too. Like we had fun with was it Anthony? Yeah, Anthony who's saying FTR, right? Forget the Raiders. But I mean, this channel has been great. And honestly, Mike, do you agree with me? I think this here was the best stream that we've had so far. And I think next week's will probably be better. It just keeps getting better. But I think this one so far, out of all the streams that we have, this is stream number 50. This is the best one.
Possibly. I definitely got very, whatever you want to call it.
Heated?
There's like an emotional word that I got
passionate.
Passionate. There it is. Yes. And I hope I don't get flamed for it, especially because I remembered the tweet a little incorrectly. I thought Vic Tafur specifically said that Harbaugh was not interested, but it turns out that was kind of my assumption. But I just think you read that tweet and you consider the way that this usually goes. The writing is sure on the wall, the way that I feel. But I'll admit I could be wrong for sure, and maybe there could have been more to be done and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, winning cures everything. And I think at the end of the day, you're going to need a quarterback to start winning. So, like we said, this might be a long season for the Raiders. My vibes were already low. We lose the way that we did to the Chargers, where I really don't think they beat us. We beat ourselves, yada, yada, yada.
Hey, real quick, is your mic plugged in all the way?
How do I sound now?
It just sounds like a little scratchy, a little bit, but
I might. How do I sound now?
I think maybe it had something to do with the when you disconnected your AirPods and whatnot. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But that should be no reason why this stream shouldn't have been, still be the best. And hope everybody has a great night. Just want to give a quick shout out again. Fossey, Proper 49er, Mr. C, Papa J, Sky Nels, M. Patel, Anthony Aguilar, Joel as always, Lecky, and Fonzie, and James. Shout out to you guys. You guys helped make the channel happen.
Did you put Empatel's comments on or no?
I did.
You did? Oh, I must.
I did. I did briefly, but I said we already talked about that stuff. You know.
Yeah. I just couldn't gauge whether he was a Raider fan or not.
Mm-hmm.
My hunch was that he was a Charger fan. But he said last place Raiders draft better. Difference between a great coach and everyone else. I was just kind of sitting here like reading them before you put them on. I was like, well, I mean, drafting better isn't really a quarterback or a coach thing. It's really a GM thing. But
But yeah, no, that's all the time that we have for tonight. Thank you, everyone. We'll catch you guys next week. Mike, last word?
Time's
up.